So Batman has been a topic that I've wanted to talk about for a while. I actually wanted to do this video about 2 years ago after my GTA 4 video. I wanted to do Batman. That was like the next immediate topic in my mind. It was either that or Fallout. And this video actually kind of has a funny backstory a little bit. I I really wanted to do this video and I got hung up on it hard because I was gonna do this first before Fallout. I remember recording a few versions of this. I recorded like two versions of this video, and I remember watching like all of Batman the Animated Series, like playing the game. I was playing Arkham Asylum. I played Arkham City. I don't know if I played Origins. It's been a while since I've played that one. It's been a few years. But I did all that. I was reading comic books and stuff, and I was really getting invested in this, and I really wanted to make this video. But I just felt like there was something off about my approach. I was taking too many notes. I was really trying too hard to be analytical, and I was trying to find things that weren't really there, and I think it came across as pretentious. I found a few too many things where I'm like, this is something I could read into, but there was actually nothing to read into, and it's like, I think this game, Arkham Asylum, I think this game speaks for itself, where there's a lot of input that I can have on this, but there's also a lot of things where you just play the game and the game kind of shows its cards, like you just have to look for the cards. Like once you find, the Riddler trophies or not just the Riddler trophies, the Riddler riddles that they have lying around. There's a lot of hidden details in the game already that are kind of already laid out. And a lot of like small things and a lot of cool references to the comic books, like all kinds of stuff. So I have to say with this that I just overthought it, and that's kind of why I'm going back to the drawing board now, and why I made that Fallout video instead, because I'm like, I just needed to do something else, because I wasted too much time on this. So lately I've been reading Batman No Man's Land, and for anyone who doesn't know, that's a big event that happened in the late 90s where they took basically the concept that they took the concept that like a big earthquake happened and it just messed up the whole city, and it created a lawless region. The government basically was like, we don't view this as a place that we can even inhabit anymore. Like this isn't even part of the United States anymore. This is a free region where like it's not even our claim anymore. So they made it just completely lawless. All these gangs take over. Penguin takes over and gets a lot of power. The GCPD sets up. They tried to do the best that they can, but Commissioner Gordon is forced to work with Two-Face again, which is really personal for him because of the events of Long Halloween, and which is basically the events of the Dark Knight, where before all this, Harvey Dent and Jim Gordon worked together a lot. So, anyways, No Man's Land is really cool, but the reason why No Man's Land kind of brought all this stuff back up is I forgot about how much influence Arkham City had, or No Man's Land had on Arkham City in its premise with the earthquake and everything, and how Arkham City handles all that. And so that kind of brought all this back up again, where I'm like, I want to do a video where I just tackle not just Arkham, but the Batman character as a whole, because I mean I love this character. There really aren't any characters that matter to me more than like Batman. I feel like I've been so attached to this character for years. I grew up with this character with back in the early 2000s, in the late 90s, when I was watching the Batman '89, the Tim Burton one with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, and Batman Returns, and the Joel Schumacher movies. Like I grew up on those movies, and a little bit of the Adam West stuff I grew up on too, and of course the animated series. So I really caught the wave of Batmania. I caught the tail end of it though. My brother was mainly into it because he was born in '91. I was born in like '97, so I caught like kind of the end of that, and I ended up borrowing a lot of his toys, or he gave me a lot of his toys from that era. So a lot of the Batman Forever toys, the Batman animated series toys, I played with those a lot. So, I've always been invested in this. And then I remember when I was about 13 years old, that was when I read my first comic book. I read, I think it was either Batman Hush or Batman Nightfall. My cousin let me borrow the comic book. It was my cousin Thomas. He let me borrow. I think it was Nightfall. I'm pretty sure it was Nightfall. That was where that all started, and that's kind of how I got in on that. And then years later, I got into Superman comic books, and I got into the DC universe, the greater DC universe, and that's just kind of how I got in. So, I've got like, I don't know, like 100 comics, like 100 trade paperbacks, and I've really been invested in comics specifically over the past 2 years. I really have bought a lot, a lot of, Green Lantern and Superman and Batman. So, anyways, that's kind of what's led me into this, and these games are really special. Like, I remember playing, I think it was on the PS3, one of the big games that influenced me to get a PlayStation 3 or an Xbox 360, because I was only on the Wii at the time and the GameCube, was I remember seeing my friend play Infamous at his house, the game where you play the guy with the electric powers on PS3, and I remember being completely mind blown by that. And then I saw my same cousin Thomas. I saw him play Oblivion on the PS3, and that blew my mind. I mean, that opened up a whole new thing. And you guys know I made a Fallout video. I love Oblivion. I love Morrowind. I love Fallout. I'm into those kinds of games. So those were really like a big, like, awakening type game of like, whoa, this is what the next generation of consoles is going to be. This is going to be a whole new kind of game. This is going to change everything. And then I saw Arkham Asylum, and I remember being so blown away just by how Batman's cape looked in this game, where I like saw his cape and I'm like, this looks like real in a way. Like this, the graphics were so good, and I never saw something that, made, like, it was such a Batman simulator, and there's all these jokes about, these games make you feel like Batman, hashtag be the Batman campaign for Arkham Knight or whatever. And, yeah, like, these games really make you feel that way. Like, and it's been sort of a benchmark for me where I think of this stuff, when I, recently I've been playing the Hitman games. And when I've been playing the Hitman games, I've been thinking, like, and it's been the first time I've played them, by the way. I haven't played them before. So I was playing them, and I'm like, I'm a huge James Bond fan, and I'm playing these games, and I'm like, these games, to me, are like what Arkham games are to Batman, these games are to James Bond, where these games really make me feel like James Bond. And that's kind of that's what these games, that says a lot about Arkham, about these games, that these games really are a benchmark of making you feel like a character. Like, when I think of these kinds of games that really put me in a Hollywood movie, that really put me in the role of a character, I think of, Batman Arkham City and Arkham Origins and this, I think of those kinds of games. I think of Hitman putting me in the role of like a James Bond type character, or a Jason Bourne type thing. And, I also think of the Uncharted games with making you feel like Indiana Jones and that kind of character. So, these kinds of games really are benchmark games for me. And it's kind of like why I play video games, It's like when I think of games that define it, of like what I want out of a game, the interactive story, the creation of a simulated film, but different, because movies aren't just cutscenes, or video games aren't just cutscenes. Video games have to be interactive, they have to matter, and games they're too cinematic nowadays, in my opinion. But I play these kinds of games to get in that kind of role, and like, a good example, like I said, with Hitman, that's the kind of game where you do have interactive, sort of like you feel like you're in the movie, but it's not overly cutscenized, It's like you feel like you're Bond, but you're not being, you're not having a story shoved down your throat kind of thing, Max Payne is similar to that, there are different kinds of games that can do that without being overbearing with cutscenes. Anyways, I think Arkham hits a really good balance with that, with the cutscenes and with the gameplay being sort of Metroidvania styled. And I know a lot of people say that, like, it's kind of a debate of if the Arkham games are Metroidvania. I personally feel that way. I'm a big fan of Castlevania, and I'm more of a fan of Castlevania than Metroid. Metroid is fun, but there's a lot more Castlevania that exists. There's so many Castlevania games. There's only two Metroid games I like, and that's Super Metroid and Metroid Prime. So, and I didn't really like Metroid Prime 2. I know that's blasphemy, but that game was a little much for me. So, yeah, like, and, previously I'd only played Metroid, and when I played Arkham, I'm like, these aren't really Metroidvania, because, like, this game has, like, a leveling system, and it's got a few different things about it. But then I played Castlevania, and Castlevania, has had a leveling system ever since Simon's Quest, back on the Nintendo. So, this sort of thing does actually kind of leak over of, like, a sort of light leveling system, the sort of puzzles. You're in this environment where where it's kind of linear. It's very atmospheric. Arkham Asylum is very atmospheric. Arkham City is also atmospheric. A lot of people say that Arkham City isn't so much a Metroidvania, but Asylum is. And while there is some, I understand why people come to that conclusion. There is some truth to that. But I still think Arkham City is underestimated, I think, as a Metroidvania, because it's still got a lot of that in there, I think. It's just kind of rearranged a little bit. Anyways, yeah, so Arkham Asylum. Where do I start with Arkham Asylum? Because this is a whole tangent. I want to talk about the whole Batman, mythos. I want to talk about everything. So, where do I start with Asylum? I mean, you start, I could, run down the list of, like, what happens in this game, but you guys all know. I think I'll start with the influence of this game and where, it sort of comes from, because the obvious comparisons that people make are to Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on Serious Earth, which, by the way, if you haven't read that, that is a trip of a book. Crazy art by Dave McLean, I think his name is. Very, very trippy, very much like if you went, like, it feels like a psychotic person almost created it, or like it's going into the mind of what the kind of person would be that would create this, of like, it feels like a very schizophrenic type book, like schizophrenic art that you see, if you look that up, or things like that. And that's, like, while it's a really cool book, I don't think it's quite, I don't know if the game is quite an adaptation of it. There's definitely some of it with Amadeus Arkham and the backstory there. And, the person who wrote Arkham Asylum and Arkham City was Paul Dini. And Paul Dini is a very important figure among the Batman franchise. I would personally credit him as a sort of founding father of Batman, in the way that, Bill Finger and Bob Kane, created Batman, and then Batman kind of went to shit for a little while, and kind of became, sort of a cartoon parody of itself, and it became an unfortunate casualty of the comic book authority, the code authority, and became overly censored, and Batman had to become, they had to get very creative and very weird with Batman, and it became kind of a self-parody, and that's how you get the Adam West parody. Adam West gets crapped on a lot, or did for a while, but, it's funny how that kind of changed over time, and eventually people really gave credit to Adam West, and you could chalk it up to, like, well, he passed away, and that's why, but that's not really why, because it was happening before that. People started to realize, once they got past the sort of 90s redefinition of Batman, where things got a lot darker, and people started to really realize that. Once you got past that culturally, people started to realize, I think, that Batman is more than just that. And you look at, because Batman has a heart. Batman really is, like, he's a tough man, but there is a sweet man under there. The kind of character, the kind of person that would give Robin, a hug, or the kind of person that, like, cares, that this is the man that actually, took care of a son, that took care of Dick Grayson, and Dick Grayson came away from being Batman's son, basically, and being someone different. Batman is not really an authoritarian in that way. He's not the sort of helicopter parent as much as you'd think he is. He does let his children, basically, which, the Robins and the Batgirls, whether it's Cassandra Cain or Barbara Gordon or Stephanie Brown or Tim Drake, Damian Wayne, all these characters, they are all his children in a way, and he lets them be different. And, you could chalk that up to, well, if they were all just clones of Batman, then you would have boring writing, and that is true, but I think it's a nice, convenient fit that those characters are different, because it shows Batman's open-mindedness, his open-heartedness, because he does not let his people become robots like him. Batman can be very robotic, very cold, he keeps his cards to himself. But he does let people, he understands that, he's not the only way. His way is not the only way. He understands that there's a necessary, that it is necessary to have people like Dick Grayson, to have good people like Superman, like Batman's connection with Kal is very important. Like, he cares about Clark, and I don't know if, I feel like Dick is Batman's best friend. I feel like Clark isn't quite Batman's best friend, but I feel like Bruce is almost like Clark's best friend, where it's like, I feel like it's an interesting dynamic there, because I feel like Clark really cares about Bruce a lot, and Bruce is very like, whatever, Clark, take care of yourself. Like, he's very, to himself, and that's kind of what he does. But I think that that's an important thing about the Adam West era, that you look at the Adam West era, and it's an important aspect to Batman. It's all meaningful stuff, and it's actually very true to what Batman is, like to what the comics were, I should say, before Neil Adams, before the redefinition of Batman, before Denny O'Neil and these writers and artists redefined Batman and made him less fat and more slimmed down and more muscular, and they made his ears taller, less short, like, the horns on his head, on his cowl. That all redefined Batman into a serious, tortured, self-sacrificing individual, where before he was kind of this, like, sweethearted, he's always smiling, he's patting Robin on the head, and, like, let's go, son, kind of thing, and, like, the old, what was it that they said back then, like, Great Scott and stuff like that, like those kinds of old school, idealized 1940s, 1950s American worldview. And, it's very interesting when you compare that to Superman, because of what Superman represents, and him being that, and how Superman has kind of become out of date in a way. Even though I love Superman, he's my favorite superhero. Batman and Superman are like equals in my eyes, but Superman, clearly, when you look at the pop culture, he's not as popular as Batman. He's not as popular as Spider-Man. Superman has kind of lost his way, and it's unfortunate. I think kind of living in a world that, post 9/11, I think that's kind of hurt Superman a little bit. But even before 9/11, in the 90s and the 80s, sort of, it became more popular to have more violent movies and more like, edgy stuff like RoboCop, and even with James Bond, like License to Kill, like if anyone's seen License to Kill, Timothy Dalton era, they brought Bond back to a more serious place, and, there was kind of a whiplash to the sort of idealized, as people call it, boring American, that these are sort of ideals to strive towards, right? But that's kind of the core of what DC is. So it's like, it's interesting that Marvel has really taken off, but DC has really struggled, like the Marvel cinematic films and the DC movies with Zack Snyder's take, it's really struggled to get, the pop culture recognition that it honestly deserves. And that's a whole other topic. And I will talk about the movies, by the way. I'm going to talk about not just Arkham Asylum. I mean, this video is entitled Arkham Analysis. I'm going to talk about everything Batman. Mainly it's going to be focused on Arkham. This is the core of where this whole video comes from. But I do want to talk about other things. I want to talk about the Joker movie, and I want to talk about, you know, the '89 movie and stuff like that. So I'll reference those things sort of in passing, and maybe get in depth about them for maybe like 5 or 10 minutes. But anyways, yeah. So I look at where Arkham comes from and where this whole idea comes from. It's like where do the influences come from Arkham Asylum for this game, and obviously there's a little bit of the game, or sorry, the name of the game, where the name comes from, with Arkham Asylum, Grant Morrison's Arkham Asylum. But you also have Nightfall, and I feel like Nightfall's initial concept really was that Bane comes in and breaks all the villains out, and Batman's got to deal with it. Batman's got to round up all the villains, and you look at an ensemble cast like No Man's Land, where Batman is dealing with the Penguin, and he's dealing with that story where I think it's the Scarecrow who's like going into some church. Like there's a church that's like a refugee place for No Man's Land, and all these people are coming into the church and like trying to find shelter, and they take in the Scarecrow because they view him as like, oh, he's schizophrenic, he's nuts, we'll take him in, we'll take care of him at this church. And obviously Leslie Tompkins is there to the doctor who raised Bruce and all that. And then Scarecrow uses that to his advantage, and like he goes to like the church's supply, and he like poisons their food. And man, Scarecrow's just an awful person. He's underestimated as far as like how evil Scarecrow is. But anyways, yeah, that's a tangent. Yeah, so like No Man's Land, you have all these different factions, like the Two-Face, and the Joker comes up at the end, and all that. And you have all this stuff, and this sort of ensemble piece, that's where this game gets its thing from. Hush is another example, Batman Hush, where it's like a Batman greatest hits album, is what people call it. And that can be kind of a pejorative thing, but I actually kind of like it when they do that. Like, I'm not a big fan of Tom King's run on Batman, the comic book run that's going on right now, or I guess ended now, just recently. But one thing I do like about Tom King's run is that he does hit all the major stops. He hits Two-Face, I think, or no, he doesn't hit Two-Face, but he hits the Joker, he hits Riddler, lots of Catwoman, lots of Bane, there's Mr. Freeze, there's Penguin, there's everyone. Like, he kind of hits all the major stops, and I can kind of appreciate that when you use all of Batman's rogues gallery. And the Arkham games make a great job of doing that. And that does come as a consequence sometimes, like in Arkham City. I remember, I think it was the IGN review at the time, criticized it as like, it makes the story a little bit too scattered when you have this sort of ensemble piece where like you're fighting Penguin, and then all of a sudden you're fighting Solomon Grundy, and you're scratching your head like, how did I get here? Like, why am I fighting Solomon Grundy out of nowhere? And then Clayface shows up, and it's like, man, it's a little too much, and I can get that, but I think there's pros to that too. I think it's cool to have that because it kind of fulfills a fantasy, Like I said, I grew up playing with these Batman toys, so like, what I wanted to do all the time was, I wanted to make, these kinds of, like, I always wanted the perfect Batman video game where I could have my dream playset of playing with Batman toys. I mean, obviously too old to play with toys now, but with video games, it's like you can create these, these systems, and I think these Arkham games really are like the best like Batman play sets that you could possibly ask for. You get all the skins, you get, especially in Arkham Knight, you get like the Batmobile and stuff like that, all the different Batmobiles that you can use, like the Tumbler and the '89 car. You can use all that stuff, and I think, when you played with the toys back in the day, you used all the villains. At least I did. All the play sets I'd have, I'd use all the different toys I had. So I think there's something entertaining about that, and I think there's an inherent entertainment value that gets overlooked or gets kind of, people kind of disregard it, and they say it waters down the story. But I think that there is a good quality to that, to having all the characters, because you can use them all. Long Halloween, Jeff Loeb loves to do that. He loves to have all the different villains. He'll throw in Killer Croc and everyone. So, I wanted to talk about the influence for this game. Obviously, another big influence with Arkham Asylum is clearly Alex Ross's art, with the more realistic style. You can definitely see a lot of that in the title. You can see a lot of the realism with, like, you just Google search Alex Ross's Batman, right? And then compare it just directly to the Arkham Asylum one specifically. And, I mean, it's basically one-to-one. It's very, very similar. It takes a little bit more of a 90s style, though, with the longer horns. Like, it's a little bit more Nightfall-esque in its style. But it's definitely very similar in its style. And it's also very much a continuation of Batman the Animated Series itself. And that's part of why, in researching to do this video, back in the day or back like a year ago or so, I wanted to watch all the animated series because this very much is a spiritual continuation of the animated series. Even in the way, like, if anyone here has watched Batman the animated series and watched the new Batman Adventures, the season 4 of Batman, where they did the restyle, they remixed the art style. And if you pay attention to the remix of the art style in season 4 of the animated show, you can see that they made the characters a little bit more extreme in certain ways. They made the Joker a little bit more disfigured and effed up in certain ways. They made him look more demonic and more evil. I can tell with this Joker in Arkham Asylum, they definitely went with a more, I want to say a more like laughing fish look. He looks like a very classic Joker. But with some of the other characters like Poison Ivy, like you look at Poison Ivy in the animated series, you look at her in season 4, her skin is much more like deathly grayish green. Like she's like degenerating. She's becoming more plant-like. And you look at her in this game and she is a lot more like that as well. She's a lot more sort of inhuman. And I like the idea that the deeper that Poison Ivy dives into her, chemical creations, that she becomes more monstrous. And you look at Killer Croc, it's the same thing. You look at Killer Croc in season 1 of the animated series and you look at him in season 4, he's degenerating. He's becoming worse. He's becoming bigger. And then you look at him in Arkham Asylum and it's a clear evolution. He's even bigger. He's even worse. And I really like that. It feels like a spiritual continuation, not just with the voice acting with Mark Hamill and Kevin Conroy. It also feels spiritually similar. Like this is the animated series if the Justice League show didn't happen. Like this is like an alternate take on it. Now they went further in that direction. They went further in their own direction as Arkham Knight and Arkham Origins happened. Obviously Arkham Origins shouldn't even be canon. I mean, and by the way, that comes from someone that loves Arkham Origins, but Arkham Origins does not really fit with the timeline, unfortunately. Arkham Origins is a much better game if you view it as its own standalone product, as its own sort of story, and that makes sense. Paul Dini didn't write it, but there were very, very talented writers that did write it. I believe, what's his name? The writer of Assassin's Creed, I think, wrote Arkham Origins. What was his name? Man, I'm blanking on him. If I think of his name, I'll mention it. But the guy that did that, I mean, he did a tremendous job on Arkham Origins. I think Arkham Origins is very underrated. And I actually think Arkham Origins, personally, I think it's better than Arkham Knight. I've got a lot of problems with Arkham Knight that I will bring up later. If I even want to address it in this video. I might even make a separate video to deal with Arkham Knight. It's its own topic, man. It's so... I mean, I think of that game and how it addressed the cliffhangers of Arkham City, and it just did not deliver on that. And, obviously Paul Dini didn't work on Arkham Knight as well. They brought in new writers that worked on Killzone Shadowfall. And yeah, it's really, it shows, I'm sorry, but like, when you get like random things, like just some of the amateur stuff, man, like there's a Gamergate reference in Arkham Knight, and I know that that's like a small thing, and it doesn't really matter that much in the grand scheme of things. But it showed that I think that the writer on that didn't really care as much. And when he played fast and loose with the Arkham franchise, or with the Batman mythos, like the way the Joker becomes like a ticking time bomb, that the Joker toxin is actually lethal in his veins, so his blood is lethal. And it's not just because of the Titan formula that was in Arkham City, which, obviously that made his blood lethal, but it's like the writer who worked on Arkham Knight didn't, like, they played Arkham City, but they didn't understand why it made Joker's blood lethal. It's not because of Joker's blood that he was spewed with at Ace or Axis Chemicals or whatever. That's not what happened. That's not why Joker's blood is lethal in that game. But they made it so that it is. So, like, Batman is being infected with Joker's blood, and he's turning into the Joker. Like, people are growing green hair and red lips, and it's like, way to kill the Joker as a character, that you chalk him up as simply that he's got mad clown disease, like mad cow disease. He's got Joker disease, and that's why he's nuts. That's why he's lost his marbles. That there's nothing like did you read The Killing Joke? Like, did you even bother? Did you read? I mean, I haven't personally read this, but what's that book? The Man Who Laughs. Like, did you read Death of the Family, Death in the Family? Did you read any of those? Do you understand this character? I'm sorry to go into a rant on Arkham Knight, but that's like, it's so frustrating to me, like really frustrating, that they would do that, that they would so fully misunderstand that. And then to chalk it up, I mean, or to round it all up, or the cherry on top really, is that you look at what the influence was for Arkham Knight, right? Like, I'm not joking when I say this. Google it, or Wikipedia it. The influence for Arkham Knight was actually on Joel Schumacher's cut Batman film, which was going to be called like Batman Unleashed or Batman Unchained or some shit. It was going to be like a full redo, and they were gonna include like Jack Nicholson in it, and the Joker was going to come back in flashbacks. It was going to literally be Arkham Knight. They were going to do that same premise. So, like, you look at it, a lot of the story beats actually fit with that cut script that was going to happen. And there's all kinds of weird stuff that was happening, like Superman Lives at that time was going to happen, and Kevin Smith and Tim Burton were going to make a Superman movie with Nicolas Cage. I mean, that shit, I mean, you can't make that shit up. It's so crazy. It's some real, forgive the reference, but it's very clown world shit. I mean, it's very Joker shit. Yeah, so... speaking of that, I do want to talk about the Joker movie a little bit at some point, but later on in the video, I'm going to talk about that. I was actually going to make a video about that on its own, but I think it all fits in here because there's a lot to talk about with the Joker himself, and how that movie ties in sort of with Joker's personality, because I want to talk about the personalities specifically, about Batman and Oracle and all these people. And Harley as well. I love that in this game. I love the audio entries that they have, and how they tie in Harley Quinn's story, how they tie in Mad Love, which was originally a comic book and then adapted into the cartoon, and then they readapted it here in the audio entries. I really love Harley's backstory, and I really love just her character. I think she's a great character that's kind of been sort of turned into an ornament these days. I think Harley used to have depth. She used to be a character that you felt a lot of sympathy for. I mean, I have no shame in admitting this. I cry when I watch Mad Love, when Batman is telling Harley, like, what was the story that made you fall for this man? Like, was it the story about the father? Was it the story about the mother hitting him? He's got 100 of them, Harley. And then she starts just crying. Like, it's like, and she's like, stop, you're breaking me. And then, like, Joker comes, and then she's like, Joker, like, I did everything for you. I did everything. I did the joke, and, the piranhas are smiling, and they're upside down, so he can see the smile, and it's like, you get it? And then And then Joker's like, it's not a joke if you have to explain it. And he hits her. And he's like, don't call me Puddin'. And then he knocks her out the window. And, like, she's, like, laying there. And there's blood dripping out of her mouth. And she's like, I guess I just didn't get the joke. And it's like, shit. Man, it's... They didn't include that in the audio entry. But I recommend looking that up. Sorry if I just spoiled it. But, geez, you gotta watch that episode. You gotta read that comic book. Because, good lord. Harley Quinn as a character is... I mean, anyone who's experienced that kind of whether you've experienced that kind of abuse firsthand or whether you've seen it, you have to understand that character, and Paul Dini himself specifically stated this. This isn't me speculating here. This has been confirmed. Paul Dini wrote that character because he knew people that had been in abusive relationships. And man, it's heart-wrenching to see. It's a very real thing. So, yeah, I highly, highly recommend looking up that episode. And it's just another influence that, you know, Arkham had, or that they had with Arkham with the game here, because... you know, and it speaks volumes because, you know, of course, Paul Dini is going to write about that. He's going to reference his own work, which he does. You know, he references his own run with Grant Morrison back when he worked with him on where he did Heart of Hush as a sequel to Jeff Loeb's Hush. You know, he's got all kinds of references to that in Arkham City, and it's really a shame how they didn't follow up on Hush properly in Arkham Knight because... I think Paul Dini could have done something great with that, and I think by introducing the Jason Todd stuff, they really sort of cheapened that, and sort of redirected it. It's like, you know, the setup from Arkham City of what was setting up for Arkham Knight, it feels like it just doesn't quite line up, if you know what I mean. And it's interesting with that reference, you know, in Arkham City where you can go into the boat and you can pull out the cryptographic sequencer and you can get on the radio and you can hear the reference to the Scarecrow. There's the Morse code, and there's the boat that you can find with the experiment that Scarecrow was pulling. You know, it's interesting actually. In real life, they've had things like that where they have radio frequencies that get hacked. There's all kinds of like creepypastas about that, and though those are fake, but there's a video actually that I saw. Where there was a thing that happened in Oregon where there was a radio frequency. It was like 97 or something like that, 97.7 or 96.7. And there were all these weird broadcasts going through it that someone was pulling, and it was like creepy. There were like weird noises. It's like, people can do that, and it's a cool and scary concept that, you know, someone could be broadcasting a murder or planning a crime or planning something sinister with Morse code and broadcasting it through radio frequencies. And it's kind of funny because, you know, back in the day, there was that one guy that would, I forget his name, he was on American Graffiti, that would like howl on the radio and like would... It was like Three Dog basically, right? Like it was like Three Dog from Fallout. That was where they got that reference from. That there was a guy who would do that. He like I forget his name. I'm sorry. I'll add it later, but or I'll come up with it later. But yeah, I think you could really make a great Batman story out of that. I think that would be really cool. So yeah, with that, I kind of want to talk. You know, I keep thinking about the Joker movie. I'm sorry. I know that this is this video, I'm meant to be talking about Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, but I kind of just want to talk about these characters in general. Oh, and by the way, the DJ disc jockey guy from American Graffiti that inspired the Fallout 3 Dog, I think. Wolfman Jack was his name. Sorry, just remember that. Anyway, so yeah, the Joker movie. So, I think with this movie, like, the main reason why I want to bring it up, because overall, I like the movie. As far as opinions go, I don't really have anything critical to say about it. But I think just as far as like, as a character study type thing, I think I think that they did a really good job in that movie showing the Joker sort of going into different stages, right? Obviously, in the movie, he starts off as a civilian, and then he kind of, gets worse and worse as his life spirals out of control. And maybe that it was kind of trying to show what the side effects were to him not taking the medication in the film. By the way, spoilers if you haven't seen it, you should. It's you see him after he does his first kill in the movie, his first kills where he kills those guys on the train. And when he goes to that room, that iconic scene where he looks at himself in the mirror and sort of does that sort of dancing presentation thing. This is something I wanted to bring up really badly. I really wanted to make a Joker video back when the movie was coming out, but I got too lazy and I kind of neglected it. So I guess I'll just talk about it, a little bit here. That whole thing was meant to represent, I think, personally, I think it was meant to represent the Joker taking on a new form. It's sort of him getting into character. Because the Joker is a character. I mean, he's very theatrical. Now, it depends on the Joker that we're talking about. I mean, I think Jack Nicholson and Heath Ledger's Joker are a little bit more authentic to, like, what they are. But, like, in the way that Batman has two sides to him, I feel like the Joker, like Mark Hamill's Joker, I mean, that's not him, really. There's something else there. Because, I mean, Hamill's Joker, he doesn't talk like Nicholson's Joker where he's like, I'm glad you're dead. Like that kind of thing. Like, and then Heath Ledger's sort of like, I'm the psychopath kind of thing. Like, he's more like, he's almost putting on an accent. Like, he's doing like you drive me crazy. Like, he does like a weird sort of, he's doing a clown voice. That almost at times, like he rolls his R's. He almost has like a thing that sounds slightly, I don't want to say British, but I kind of want to say British, where like sometimes it just sounds a little bit like he's putting on a fake, phony British accent that's sort of meant to be theatrical, clown-like, or almost like you could compare it to old radio, sort of like 1940s, the sports commentator thing, or the old 1940s radio where they would heighten their voice. Like he's putting on a show, and one of the really interesting things about that in relation to the Joker movie is that I got a lot of Grant Morrison's Joker vibes from that movie. And for anyone that's read Grant Morrison's Joker, then you know what I'm talking about, probably. If you haven't, let me explain what his Joker was. Because he wrote this story called The Clown at Midnight, which was a comic book that was written in prose. So basically not a comic book. It was just this sort of written format with a few pictures on the side, basically, which was very bad in my opinion. I don't think it really worked. I don't like his writing when it comes to writing in prose. I like his writing normally, but in prose I didn't really enjoy it personally. It was he front-loaded it with too much exposition and too much allegory, I think. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading The Clown at Midnight, personally. However, The Clown at Midnight has a thing about it that is interesting, an interesting concept that was, I think, better executed in Scott Snyder's Death of the Family, where the Joker cuts his face off and kind of reinvents himself. Basically, the concept here is that the Joker, through the years, sort of reinvents himself. You look at the Joker in the 1940s, and he's very much a killer. He's just the kind of guy that would kill someone. He would hang someone, in a mall, and then would get on the loudspeaker and say, if you don't give me the money at this amount of time, then I will kill another person. The Joker has spoken. Bam. He's done. That was the golden age 1940s Joker, and people forget about that, but he was straight up a killer. He was very much like Heath Ledger's Joker, and Heath Ledger's Joker in many ways is the truest Joker to the Golden Age in that way, in the way that he's just straight up a killer with no jokes. That was the whole point of the Joker originally when what's his name, Robinson and Bob Kane and Bill Finger, when they created him, that was the whole concept, was to make just straight up a serial killer that wears a clown outfit, and that made him, extra creepy, and separated him from your typical killer, like, I don't know, Victor Zsasz or someone like that. And that's kind of what they did with this Joker, was that they would reinvent him, because then you get into the 50s and you see a Joker that, is much more like kind of, literally clowning around. He's just making jokes. He doesn't even kill people that much. And then, you get to Joker's Five-Way Revenge, when he's reinvented with Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil. And that's a Joker that becomes more serious again, and it kind of tries to level him out a little bit, that he's the killer, but he's also the clown. And that's where you basically get Mark Hamill's Joker. That's where you basically get the laughing fish Joker and all that, and like, you killed Captain Clown, that kind of Joker. Like, it's that perfect balance Joker, which I think Jack Nicholson also captured in his own Jack Nicholson-esque way. I think he captured that Joker pretty well, of being a balanced clown and killer. And even Cesar Romero had his moments too, where there's that one clip where Cesar Romero is pointing the gun at someone, and he's like, turn around or I'll blow your head off, or whatever. Like, there's serious moments with Romero's Joker here and there. They're very, very far in between, because for the most part that Joker was very silly, being of its era. But there were a few moments where he pushed the line and got a little creepy. Seriously, Google search Cesar Romero's Joker on Google and take a look at him. There's some creepy images of him. I know it's kind of funny and it's hard to take him seriously with the mustache, but there's some images where he looks truly creepy. Like, his eyes are really bulging and looking kind of bloodshot because of the makeup, and like, he actually looks kind of demonic sometimes. So there was a lot of potential with that Joker, and I think he's a valid Joker. I don't think he's invalid. And again, with the sort of underrated nature of the Adam West era, where there's certain things about it that were actually very true to the comics and very authentic, and in some ways push the line, push boundaries a little bit, because I would actually take the Cesar Romero Joker in the Adam West series than the Joker that was in the comics at that time, which was a lot more silly and weird, and psychedelic and all this shit. So, yeah, so, and then you get to the Alan Moore Killing Joke sort of thing, where that Joker is just a complete monster, and then you get to Death of the Family, and everything's all effed up, and like, he's just like beating, he beats Robin with a crowbar and then kills Jason Todd, and all that. So the Joker goes through these different cycles, and The Clown at Midnight kind of made that, like, they actualized that. They made that canon. They made that self-aware. And there's sort of a ritual that he does in that book, where he's laying down on the floor and he's sort of accepting demons sort of into him. It's almost like a demonic possession thing, where he's like accepting a new form. He gets shot in the head and he ends up in the asylum, and he survives the bullet hole to the head, like Fallout New Vegas style. And he's in the asylum and he kind of reinvents himself, and he's like, I'm going to become a new version of me. And it scares the shit out of Harley Quinn, and she's like, Joker, you're not the same anymore, and like, do you still love me, Mr. J? And he's like, it's all messed up. And you see that a lot, and I think better presented in Death of the Family, where, Joker carves his face off and it scares Harley Quinn, and she's like, he's not the same anymore, like, you have to stop him, and like, she actually calls for help. And then he just takes things way too far, and it's like, that story, Death of the Family, I highly recommend it. I feel like that's the one time where Batman came closest to killing Joker since The Killing Joke, where he was right on that edge. He was ready to do it. And, it means business, like, he means business when even Harley Quinn's scared. And how this all connects back to the Joker movie is that in the Joker movie, he does that sort of ritual, where he sort of does a kind of, it almost looks like mysticism, and he gets into form. He takes on something. It's like he's getting into character. Another example you could I think of is like Pulp Fiction, you know, in the scene before they go into the apartment and like loan shark this guy, that they kind of like Samuel Jackson is talking to Travolta's character, and Jules was his name, and he's pacing around kind of in the hallway before they get in the elevator, and they're kind of talking the shit and like kind of or shooting the shit, and they're kind of like getting ready, like they're getting ready, like they're like actors that are like pacing before a play, you know, they're pumping themselves up and getting into character, and it's different from this because it's more literal. That Joker is literally taking on sort of a different form. And it's not acting, it becomes him. But that's the thing, though. The acting, that is what Joker is. He becomes his act. You know, like, who he is hard to break through to. I mean, Batman can break through to it. Like, in The Killing Joke, you know, he says to Joker, you know, it's never too late. You can turn back, you know. Even for you, it's possible. And that's when Joker says, like, it actually gets to him. Like, he actually is like, I understand what you mean. I understand where you're coming from, but it's too late for me. And I just want you to know that. It's just too late for me. I appreciate the effort, though, Batman, but it's too late. And then that leads into his joke about, like, you know, shine the flashlight across the thing, and, you know, I would never trust you because you just turned it off halfway, and then he starts laughing, and then ambiguous ending where Batman might have killed him or might not have. Obviously, canonically, he didn't, but, yeah, and by the way, I love this little reference right here. I don't know if you guys know this, but, if you have your copy of The Killing Joke, pull it up, to look this up, or maybe you remember this, but you don't have to work here, or you don't have to be mad to work here, but it certainly helps. That's a little reference to The Killing Joke. You find that in the basement in the asylum, in Arkham Asylum, just as a little reference to the book. So yeah, you know, and that's just kind of an important thing that I wanted to bring up, that in that movie he takes on different forms, and it's just an interesting thing that I wanted to add, and it might not even be necessarily relevant to Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, because the form that he takes on in this is very basic. It's very animated series. It's not Death of the Family. It's not him just going out of control, or it's very straightforward. It's not Grant Morrison's Joker. It's very straightforward. This is your, in many ways, definitive Joker, I would say. With the way he looks and acts in Arkham Asylum. It's probably the best take on the Joker ever created. And one thing I also wanted to mention, small detail here, but actually, if you go to the medical place, the medical facility, there is a little plaque that says that this facility was funded and created by Bruce Wayne. And I think that's an interesting detail. Specifically because you have a situation at this asylum where it's super run down, the place is practically falling apart, and you have this one little detail, very small, and it's part of a Riddler trophy, or a Riddler riddle, by the way, that you scan that. And it says, you know, this unit was funded by Bruce Wayne, the Bruce Wayne Foundation for the Criminally Insane. So it shows how much Bruce actually has an effect on this whole setting, you know, on Gotham. That, you know, without his funding, they wouldn't even have a medical facility at this place. There would literally only be the penitentiary, or whatever medical facility it was before. It was barely a facility, or it was a lot less funded. It was a lot smaller, you know. So little details like that really count towards this game and making it more cohesive, you know, building a world. They do a great job with that. And it's really such a shame that Arkham Knight kind of took the franchise in a direction where it stopped. I feel like Arkham Asylum and City followed the animated series in spirit, and then something happened with Origins, and especially Knight, where it just stopped feeling like it was made in the spirit of the animated show. It felt more like, less like a spiritual sequel to the animated series and more like a accidental spiritual sequel to Joel Schumacher's Thing because of that cut plot. If you look that up, so that was a big deal for me personally. That things felt kind of abandoned, and there's a lot of potential with the Scarecrow in Arkham Knight. John Noble voiced Scarecrow in that, and I think he did a tremendous job. But I think that if you're going to do that character, you need to do him right. You need to do him a specific way. He is a very ruthless character, like I mentioned before, in the No Man's Land arc. He's very, very evil. Maybe the most evil villain, one of them. And maybe not as evil as, like, Victor Zsasz, I guess. But he's pretty bad. And, one of the things that I remember them doing that was, like, kind of the moment that, like, broke my brain when I was playing Arkham Knight. And really, it was like the jump the shark moment, officially, was when you go and you see Barbara Gordon shoot herself in the head in that hallucination, and the Scarecrow knows what you hallucinated. Like, I'm sorry, the Scarecrow's a smart character, but he's not that smart, and his chemicals are not that strong. It's bad writing. I'm sorry. You can't... Like, I can't suspend my disbelief with that. That's a really, really tough one, especially when I'm a Batman fan who, for a long time, like, I've liked these characters and I've followed these characters and I know the rules of these characters, right? Like, in Superman, we know Superman's rules, right? Like, he's weak to kryptonite. He's pretty strong. But there are certain things that can hurt him. He's got certain weaknesses, and we know the rules, like red sun energy, magic. There's like these little loopholes that, can defeat Superman. But if you do it like the movie, like Superman 3 or something, or Superman 4, where Superman can suddenly teleport, or can suddenly, like, just change costumes, or so, like, without, by just thinking it, or something stupid like that, I'm blanking on the specific example, because they do weird things in those movies, in general. Even Superman flying so fast that he can turn back time. I mean, Superman's not the Flash. He can't typically do that. Even in the Silver Age, I don't remember him doing that. Maybe I'm wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, if anyone knows. But, yeah, so therefore, you can't just make Scarecrow have mind control. I mean, that's Mad Hatter's gimmick, isn't it? I mean, look, if Scarecrow was getting Mad Hatter's stuff, if he was getting his chemical doses and you wanted to, kind of make that work from a writing perspective, I guess you could, but that's not what Scarecrow does. So it's just really, I mean, it took me out of the experience, I remember, and that was the first moment where I'm like, there's something seriously wrong with this game. And the other moments before that were gameplay related with the Batmobile and not liking some of that. Which, I don't know. I mean, over time, I've kind of come to accept the Batmobile in that game as being not great, but tolerable, But it's interesting, because for a lot of people, that was their main complaint with that game. It was the Batmobile. It wasn't the story. It wasn't the writing. I think a lot of people just kind of ignored a lot of that in Arkham Knight. A lot of the bad writing, a lot of the inconsistent tone. I think that a lot of people just went with it because it had a cool way of presenting itself. You can have a really bad story or a really weak story and present it in a way that's flashy, and it works for people. I hate to use this as an example, because this isn't actually, I don't think this is really a bad story or a bad movie. But a movie like Rogue One, Star Wars Rogue One, that's a story that is fine, but it's pretty basic, It's like a pretty straightforward sort of plot, and we don't really get to know those characters that well. But when they kill them off at the end, you still kind of feel it just because it looked kind of cool. I don't know. There's like moments. That movie captures moments. Like Hush is the same way, Batman Hush. I like that story overall, but it doesn't quite work. It wins more for its moments, It's cool moments. And I feel like Arkham Knight had some good moments, and that's why it wasn't bad for a lot of people. That's why a lot of people, a lot of the reviewers, game critics, and such, did not complain about the story so much. But that's just my take. I don't know. And hey, if there's people out there that like it, that's cool. I've tried a few times. I've played Arkham Knight 3 times. I got all the Riddler trophies. I almost got the platinum, but it just doesn't do it for me. There's just something off about that one. And the Batmobile, look, it's fun to roam around like Grand Theft Auto style, but look, Batman, it's kind of out of character because Batman, he uses the Batmobile, but he uses it tactically. He uses it for very specific tactical scenarios. Like, the moment you give someone the ability to drive the Batmobile, you know they're going to drive like a jackass like GTA and like run into everything, and Batman would not do that. So it just kind of doesn't work. I mean, if you can suspend your disbelief on that, then and just go with it and just treat it, well, it's just a video game, so who cares? I want to drive the Batmobile, then fine. But I kind of play these games as like Batman experiences. I don't know, like I want to feel like I'm Batman. That's the whole point, be the Batman or whatever. Like, I feel like Arkham Knight actually had a problem with that. And it's interesting because what made me actually like want to do this video in the first place was I was looking up a lot of Arkham Analysis videos, and I saw one that, oh man, I'm sorry, I can't remember the guy's name. I don't care to remember his name. I don't remember his YouTube, but he just shit all over Arkham Asylum, all over Arkham City, and all over Arkham Origins. And then talking about Arkham Knight, he like said that that's the only good game in the franchise. And this video had like 100,000 views or something and lots of likes, and I'm like, sometimes I have a little bit of imposter syndrome, to be honest, where it's like, why am I doing these like, why do people want to listen to me? My videos are kind of low production. I don't edit them that much. It's just kind of audio. It's more like a podcast. Like, why would anyone want to listen to me, right? Well, I mean, the fact that that guy got as many views as he did and as much support as he did when he was just, I'm sorry, but dead wrong about this franchise, and it was more of a hateful video. It was more of a negative video about tearing down and nitpicking this whole thing of like, oh, this wouldn't work. Oh, this is comic booky dialogue. Oh, look at how cringy it is. It's the freaking Bat. It's like, come on. Like, we know that this is a comic book. It's a comic book video game. Just like Batman 89 is a comic book movie, right? Like, you can forgive things. You let them go. Like, when you watch James Bond, no one's complaining that, like, oh, Blofeld, when he says, you only live twice, Mr. Bond, like, that's some kind of, like, oh, that's bad writing. Oh, that sucks. Like, come on. Like, it's meant to be, that's what it is. It's got a little bit of camp, Like, that's okay. That's okay. Is everyone afraid of camp now? Is everyone afraid of embracing what you are? Like, it has to be dead serious with every little thing? This is one of my problems that I have with the Zack Snyder stuff, by the way, if I want to lead into that, of like, look, I mean, I don't hate Man of Steel, to be honest, and I know that that's kind of contentious. I remember I went to a GameStop, and it was for the Spider-Man PS4 midnight launch or whatever, like, late night release, and we were talking about superheroes in line, and I remember saying I liked Man of Steel, and everyone gasped, and they were like, what? What, you like Man of Steel? Like, dude, that movie sucks, dude. And it's like, dude, you should watch Smallville. That's way better. And I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, yeah, you're right. Of course, in my head I'm saying, yeah, I bet that holds up really well, Smallville. Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna watch Smallville now. No offense to Smallville, but, I mean, come on, like, whatever. I don't think Man of Steel is that bad. They portrayed an interesting version of Zod. They did some interesting stuff there. Is it a little bit too grim dark? Is it a little bit too, like, they don't show Superman smiling enough? They don't show enough of the Christopher Reeve stuff? Yeah, that's true. But I thought the movie was okay. It was a decent start, And I think that they did a good job paying homage to the early post-crisis Superman. A lot of aesthetic stuff that lined up with John Byrne's version of Krypton. For any Superman fans out there who know that, kudos. But yeah, like, that's, kind of the early reboot that they did of Superman that kind of made him more serious, that kind of made him more grounded, like he can take more hits. Not everything has to hurt him, or not everything he's invulnerable to. Like there are things that can hurt him more, kind of more like what Superman the animated series did with Superman, where he can take more damage, and what the Justice League Unlimited show did, and stuff like that. So yeah, I think. Well, I think that the Arkham games, I mean, obviously they're a lot more serious, and I do prefer Batman to be serious overall, but I do also like a little bit of heart there, a little bit of like, there's something there that, deep inside Batman is good, he's a good guy. But, there's all these different takes on Batman, and, I have my opinions on all of them. Like, personally, I mean, I love Michael Keaton's Batman, but that's an interesting debate because I don't like Ben Affleck's. And I don't like Ben Affleck's for the reason that he kills people. And I found it to be kind of in poor taste, and the fact that he brands people. But then I've thought before, like, am I a hypocrite, though? Because I like Michael Keaton's Batman, and he also kills people. And I guess it's a matter of how you do it, It's a matter, for me personally, I mean, everyone's going to have their own definition of this, but... And I've seen people defend Batman vs. Superman for having Batman kill people because, well, the movie doesn't encourage Batman killing people, though. Batman's a villain in the piece, so you might as well view it as a different Batman, kind of like Flashpoint, like Elseworlds Batman, where it's like it's Thomas Wayne that's murdering people and stuff like that, that who's, like, here's an alternate reality where Batman kills people and, all that. Like... Whatever, you can do that, I guess. But I feel like there was just something wrong with it because it felt like they were treading on sacred ground because they were like, they had him in the Dark Knight Returns outfit, and it's like, boy, like, you have him in the Dark Knight Returns outfit, you have a lot of Dark Knight Returns references, including, like, shots that literally resemble the cover of the book, and you have all this stuff that they do with that, and I don't like that because it's like they misunderstood Dark Knight Returns, because they leave one scene a little bit ambiguous if Batman kills someone in Dark Knight Returns, where I'm not quite sure what happened, but overall Dark Knight Returns was not Batman not giving a shit about collateral damage and, like, branding people and, like, having people executed in prison in the director's cut of BVS, like, that stuff is I'm sorry, but that's just, like, in poor taste, in my opinion. While with the Michael Keaton ones, in Batman 89, he blows up that facility, and, he drops the bomb right in front of that guy. And, my defense of that, I guess, would be, it just feels like that... I don't know if he saw it. I don't know if the guy could have ran. I feel like Batman was in a moment of, like, anger there, where I kind of understood why he was pissed, why he was killing people in that moment. Because he just found out that the Joker was the person who killed his parents, so it's kind of a Batman that's a little bit more unhinged in those moments. I feel like the kills where he's in the clock tower and he knocks the guy off the building and he falls to his death. I think that those kinds of deaths are actually, like, if you're going to have Batman kill, I feel like that's how you do it, to be honest. I feel like Batman should almost kill people on accident. It should almost be like, he knocks a guy off a building or something. Or, Batman's no-kill rule is good and all, but, like, and it's important, but... it's okay for Batman to maybe accidentally kill someone sometimes, because Batman is a man, he's a human, he was made in this way, like, Batman was made as a reaction to Superman, they had Action Comics running, Superman was super powerful, of course at first he couldn't fly, he could only jump really far, but then the cartoons came out and he could fly, because they couldn't animate him jumping, so they made him fly, and then they made him fly in the comics, and then... it's like, we have this really powerful guy that can, like, fly and shoot lasers out of his eyes. Let's make a superhero that's, like, the antithesis of that. Like, Superman is powered by the sun. He's powered by daylight. Let's have a character that stalks in the night with nothing but, like, his fists, some lock picks, and a few little gadgets and like some ropes and stuff, and that's it basically. Just roll with that. And then they hired Bob Kane and Bill Finger to write that and to draw that. And that's the way that is, and I like that, and I feel like with Batman, he just needs to be presented as human, and part of being human is not having a contingency plan for everything. And, credit to people who get that reference. It's, anyone out there who's reading comics, right? Like, look, Batman has a contingency plan for everything, and it's ridiculous. Like, it doesn't have to be that way. And I know that it's kind of a thing that, people call it Batwank or whatever. Like, it's a Batman circle jerk where it's like, here's Batman, having a plan just in case, like, the moon blows up. So he's got a hidden satellite that can contain the debris of the moon before it hits the Earth. Like, that kind of thing. And, certain writers started that. You could say maybe Grant Morrison sort of started that a little bit, or Mark Waid. It started in the JLA, the Justice League of America stuff, somewhere in there. And it was something specifically that Denny O'Neil disagreed with at the time, because he was editor of Batman at Large, and he was running events like Nightfall and No Man's Land, and he was like, look, Batman shouldn't be this powerful. Batman shouldn't be doing this. And it's one of those things where, like, Batman, like, part of him being human is that he makes mistakes, and I think one of the mistakes that Batman should make is that sometimes he can't save everyone. Sometimes he does kill people on accident, or can't save someone. I kind of like the scene. I know it's kind of a morally weird scene, but the scene in Batman Begins where he says, I don't have to save you. I don't kill people, but I don't have to save you. And then he leaves, and then Ray crashes into the thing. I mean, it's kind of a bizarre scene. I don't know if I'd write that scene personally, but I like what it's going for, and I like Batman Begins a lot. So yeah, it's kind of a question of, like, how do you do this? How do you have Batman kill in good taste? And I feel like the new movies don't really do that so well, and it just gets too grim and too dark. You got to be careful with that stuff. You don't want Batman to go too far in that direction. I feel like Batman Returns only crossed the line once with that one explosive where he knocks him in, and then Batman Forever kind of crosses the line when he throws all those coins in the air, and then Two-Face falls. Yeah, which, by the way, I mean, regarding those movies, Batman Forever and I think Batman Forever is actually kind of man, this might be the moment where everyone turns off this video, so bear with me. But I don't think Batman Forever is that bad. I think Batman and Robin is really bad. Batman Forever has some potential in it. I think 89 is obviously the best. Returns has a lot of problems. It makes up for its problems in atmosphere and in performances. And then Forever has a lot of kind of weird performances and weird acting, and it's a lot more cheesy. But I think makes up for that in what it's going for in the plot. I think that the plot to Batman Forever is actually not that bad. I like the plot that, Bruce Wayne is trying to discover himself and is trying to find sort of his reasoning, his motivation to be Batman. That, there's that deleted scene I recommend looking up to any out there who aren't aware of Batman Forever. With the scene, there's a scene where Batman goes into the Batcave and he finds this old journal that he dropped in this hole with, and he has this weird encounter with this bat, and it's very like a giant man bat type thing, and it's very Grant Morrison. It's very trippy, and it's very kind of there's a lot of imagery there. I feel like it's drawing from Year One a little bit with the bat stuff and the significance of the bat. That there's kind of a mystical side to that of like a paranormal or some kind of destiny thing. Like there's a destiny to the bat, like Batman bleeding out in year one and then, telling himself like, do I die here or do I call Alfred and continue to live? I don't know if I have the motivation to live anymore. And then the bat crashes through the window and he's like, that's my cue. That's my message, whether it's from my parents or from God or something. That's it. Or if it's a coincidence, that's it. And he rings that bell and he knows what he has to do. And you see that sort of in Forever in that scene where he finds his motivation to be Batman forever, and being Batman not because he has to, but because he chooses to. It's him accepting, not feeling an obligation like he has to. And I think that that's actually a really important theme to Batman as a whole, And I think that that's an important thing that a lot of writers don't get about Batman. And I like that, in the Batman movies, through that little trilogy. I kind of consider it a trilogy, between those and Forever. I know Forever goes down a little bit of a detour and it goes too weird. There's a different stylistic thing to it. It's they went too far. I hate Two-Face. I especially hate Two-Face in Forever. I wish they kept Billy D. Williams, and I wish that they made him serious. But I actually kind of like Jim Carrey's Riddler. I don't really have a problem with it. I kind of like Chris O'Donnell as Robin, which I know is blasphemy because he's too old. But I kind of like him as like a Nightwing type character. I don't know. There's cool moments in that movie. But what I was going to say was, the way these things all kind of build together, the way it all comes together. I mean, Alfred is kind of the through line through those three movies, and he's always telling Bruce, like, I don't want you to be Batman anymore. Like, I don't want you to live this tortured life. I want you to settle down and find someone. I want you to have someone, you're not alone. You're not alone in this fight. And, he's very gung-ho about that, about him being with Vicky Vale. And he kind of ends up with her prematurely, kind of, I feel like, because of that, because Alfred kind of nudges him. And then, you have the whole Catwoman thing, and Batman finally finds someone that he can relate to who's just kind of crazy like he is. She lives a similar life to him. And then you have the Chase Meridian thing, which Chase Meridian's a very bad character, I think, in execution, but kind of an interesting concept, again, that he dates a therapist. And then, it kind of all comes together with Robin, that, Robin becomes this person, Dick Grayson, this person that he can relate to, that he cares about. And, I kind of like the final shot of Forever where they're both running in the light together. I think that's really kind of cool. I mean, it's obvious. I'm not going to try and say it's like super symbolic and deep. I mean, it is what it is, but I like that because it gives a feeling of completeness, that Batman is no longer alone. He has someone, he's got a family, like he's not where he was at in '89 anymore. And, he kills less people. I mean, Batman doesn't kill anyone in Batman Forever except for Two-Face at the end, while in the other movies he kills more people. So it's kind of like him becoming Batman fully, like a fully realized Batman in Forever. The problem is that the movie's just too cheesy, and I wish it was more serious, but it is what it is. The movie has its identity. So the image I actually just pulled up here is, I actually wanted to include some of these images. This one right here is Ra's al Ghul's body was actually in this body bag, and he disappears in Arkham Asylum when you go back. There's a little body with a foot sticking out and a tag that said Ra's al Ghul. And you return at the end of the game, the body's gone. Also, there's a hidden room, if you look it up. I actually don't have a screenshot of it here, unfortunately, but there's a room where you can find Quincy Sharp's hidden room in his office where he's planning out the blueprints for Arkham City and moving the asylum into the city. Another thing is that Penelope Young was, this is her office, and she's studying all kinds of stuff here. She's got Black Mask's mask in the background, and we know that Joker was her study. She was focusing on the Joker, Penelope Young, to her bad fate, though, because she ends up dying because of it. But she's got the black mask there, and, you know, for anyone that's played Arkham Origins, you know that Joker disguised himself as Black Mask. Now, I don't think that they thought that far ahead, obviously, but it's a cool little detail, and it's something I wanted to mention, and, you know, I've got a lot of details like that that are in there, and, you know, I just recommend, man, like, just play this game for yourself, and look for these kinds of details, and really just put on your thinking cap. You know, you don't need me to explain some of this stuff. Like, play Arkham and just go around and do those Riddler riddles and examine the environment, because this game is so chock full of details that it is actually mind-blowing how much there is in there. There's a lot of foreshadowing, there's a lot of subtlety, there's a lot of references to the comic books and the cartoon and everything. Everything Batman. I mean, no game screams Batman more than Arkham Asylum. And, I mean, honestly, it channels my inner comic book nerd and inner Batman fan a little bit more than Arkham City even though I think Arkham City might be a little bit of a better game. I feel like I geek out a little bit more over Asylum because of how many references there are in it and how much there is, you know. So anyways, I think now I'm going to talk a little bit more about City, because Asylum, you know, like, there isn't that much to say about Asylum for me. The audio tapes are amazing. You know, I recommend you listen to those. There's a lot of cool stuff in the game. Obviously, the Joker talks, or the Venom thing is a little bit dumb, and Joker becomes a big dumb Venom. And, you know, you punch him in the face. Batman has a badass moment where he explosive gels his hand and punches him in the face. If you want a good Arkham Asylum sort of analysis, I actually recommend Arshan Gaya's little thing that he did on it. I'll put a link to that in the description. You know, anyone who's familiar with my channel knows that I reference him sometimes. And he's kind of who inspired me to do this sort of video format anyways. So yeah, you know, I'd recommend checking him out with his behind the scenes stuff there. But yeah, I'm trying to think of last notes about Arkham Asylum. Hugo Strange's office is in the game. It's got like an electric floor, so there's some hidden details there. Obviously Quincy Sharp. There's like things that are off about him. One of the things that I was actually going to bring up in that other video, and kind of the reason why I shut it down and why I ended up not uploading that video, is I wasn't certain about a certain detail where Quincy Sharp has this staff that he carries around, and this is totally me reading too much into it, just gotta say this right now, but he carries this staff, like this walking cane around, and man, I swear, every time I look at that thing, I'm like, that looks like something Ra's al Ghul would have, or would give to him, and I really like that concept, and I know for a fact in the hidden details in Arkham City that Hugo Strange was actually brainwashing Quincy Sharp. He was actually convincing him into thinking that he was Amadeus Arkham, that kind of thing. And that's how that's how they characterized that in Arkham City, and actually fleshed that out and gave it more depth, and explained it. So there's things like that, you know. Yeah, I mean, this game really speaks for itself. It's a beautiful game. I highly recommend it. But I feel like now it's time for me to talk about Arkham City. So I'm going to do that now. Starting with... Oh, and one more detail that I forgot really quick about Asylum, just one small thing. I like playing the game with low brightness, so I highly recommend actually playing it like that. If you're into that sort of thing. Then you kind of have to rely on the detective vision a little bit more to see things, kind of like night vision. It just kind of immerses me more in the Batman experience. Anyways, so Arkham City. I'll start with how good this game was at capturing a certain theme that I've already talked about with the killing thing, right? And with Batman's presence in Arkham. You know, I'll just hit the major theme right out the gate. I mean, Arkham City's first major compelling theme that really kind of connected for me was the thought of his presence creates these animals, as Hugo Strange said himself. Does Batman make this situation worse? Because you look at Arkham City, And, like, how did it get this bad? You know? How did it get so bad to the point where they're in this totally messed up part of the city? All the prisoners have been shipped here from not just the asylum, but from Blackgate. And it's so out of control, you know? Like, it kind of creates an identity crisis for Batman, I think, a little bit. That this whole situation is, and like, yeah, I mean, Hugo Strange says it himself, like, did it ever occur to you that all of this is your fault? That your presence creates these animals? And they don't answer that question. They leave it up to the player, and I appreciate that. Because, you know, everyone has their own answer on this. I mean, I think that Batman's a very, I mean, he's anti-death. He's anti-death penalty, probably. He is a conservative character overall, though, I think, because of how hard on crime he is and how he kind of uses his money as a superpower. But Batman, I feel like Batman not killing, that is kind of a personal thing for him. It's like his enemy is death, you know? And I can't take credit for that because I know just recently the director or the writer of True Detective actually wants to write a Batman movie. And he wrote about that on his social media that, like, you know, Batman's mortal enemy is death. That's why he doesn't kill people. And I think that's an interesting way to put it. But he's also, like, it's a little bit of a morally weird situation, though, because, like, what is the point of fighting this battle if it just keeps going? It never ends, you know? And, you know, Batman, it gets to him. It gets to him. His curse, you know, like that episode of the animated series. I forget the name of the episode, but he says, you know, when you look deep into the abyss for long enough, it stares back at you. It just gets to him after a while, and he says, you know, maybe I'll die someday. He tells this to Robin. He says, you know, maybe it'll be Two-Face or the Joker, or maybe just some punk that gets lucky. But one day, my day is going to be up. It's going to be over. And, you know, that whole event was triggered by him not being able to save Gordon in that episode. The episode is called I Am the Night, actually. I highly recommend that episode. It's one of my favorite episodes of the animated series, and it actually got adapted into a comic, I think. Yeah, so, you know, you have things like that, and it really is his curse that weighs on him. And, I mean, the curse has never been more heavy for him than in this game, where, you know, Talia dies. He couldn't save the Joker. All these people die, you know, like Hugo Strange dies. A bunch of helicopters come in and just start murdering both civilians, like political enemies of Hugo Strange that he had set up in this place, as well as, you know, normal criminals that are getting killed. So all of this stuff is happening, and Batman just feels defeated because it's like the game was rigged against him from the start. And if you play Arkham Origins and you treat it as canon, I guess, then, you know, there is actually an audio entry of Shiva talking to Quincy Sharp, you know, so it actually wasn't just Hugo Strange that was brainwashing Quincy Sharp. Shiva set it all up from the beginning with Ra's al Ghul. So Ra's al Ghul always had plans to eventually kill all the scum in Arkham, or in Gotham, to cleanse the city. And it's an interesting take on this character, because, I mean, there's all these different takes on Ra's al Ghul, and I mean, to be honest with you, Ra's is actually my favorite villain in the Batman series. I really like Ra's. I really like Talia. I really like Two-Face, and I really like the Joker and Harley. Like, those five, I would say, are like my favorite villains. And I guess Catwoman, but I almost don't count her as a villain. She's kind of in a weird anti-hero spot sometimes. But, you know, you have this situation where Ra's is deciding to take, you know, sort of an affirmative action and, like, just kill all these guys because he thinks that, you know, the ends justify the means. And there's all these different takes on Ra's. Sometimes he's portrayed as an eco-terrorist. Like, that's how he was, I think, in the original Denny O'Neil version of Ra's. That's how he was in the cartoon, in the animated series, where that adaptation was actually by Denny O'Neil. He wrote that. So, what is Ra's motivation here? Is it just to prove Batman wrong? Either way, it all backfires on him at the end because he gets his daughter killed. And that's actually one of the few interactions I really like in Arkham Knight, is when you meet him in the DLC when he's older. By the way, that DLC, the Season of Infamy, way better written than the main game. I don't know who wrote that stuff, but way better written. I have a feeling that Warner Brothers Games Montreal actually did that DLC. I could be wrong. I know that they did the Batgirl DLC. I don't know if they did the Season of Infamy. I don't know who wrote that, but it's way, way better written than the main game. So good for them, whoever wrote that. And, writers can get better. It could have been the writers from Arkham Knight, and then they just kind of smartened up, and, you never know. You got to give people the benefit of the doubt with that stuff. But, yeah, you have all this stuff that Arkham Knight set up, or Arkham City set up for Arkham Knight, and, all this potential that could have been really taken to interesting spots or to interesting places like Hush, but, they kind of just blew it with showing, like, basically having, like, a cameo of Hush that lasted about 5 minutes, and then that was it. And then like, the Azrael missions were a little bit better, but still not great, like, kind of a letdown. But there are some areas where they did live up in Arkham Knight, where they did live up to Arkham City's legacy. Moments with Ra's al Ghul, where you get to choose whether or not Batman kills him or not, puts him out of his misery. I think that's one of the best moments in the whole series. I really love... There's this one moment, man. I gotta bring it up here. It's this moment where Bruce is talking to Jim, and he's going up the elevator, and it starts playing this music. And it's this moment right here when he says, "It's been an honor, Jim." And he says that, and it's like, oh, I just get chills. Like, there's that one moment when they're going up the elevator, and they're gonna confront the Scarecrow in front of Barbara in the wheelchair, and he's got her as a hostage. And it's like this moment of, like, these two men have, like, fought and bled together. Like, these are like blood brothers, and they're about to face, this situation where they both love this girl, like, that's his daughter, and to Batman that's also basically his daughter. And they're both, like, it's such a great moment. And then the fact that they've been fighting each other the whole game, sort of, it's such an important moment. And I think one thing that also, I mean, as great as that moment it is, and I guess it is worth it having that moment, but the way that, it's something I don't like, because the way that they fight each other, the way that Jim just turns on Batman is so, to me at least, out of character with the Jim of the animated series. And you could say that this is all just, it's the Arkhamverse, right? Like, stop being so attached to the animated series. But I can't let go of Paul Dini. Look, Paul Dini is such an important writer. They were so lucky to have him. I mean, like I said, a founding father, basically, of Batman. He created Mr. Freeze's backstory. He created Harley Quinn. He's added a lot. He added a lot to Hush. This guy's added a lot to the Batman franchise, and with the animated series alone. So, like, you have all of this, and then, watch the episode Over the Edge. The Batman episode. For those that don't know, I can describe the episode. It's basically a situation where it seems like it's the last episode of Batman. They have Barbara Gordon. She's died. She like fell off of a roof and died, and basically she was fighting like Scarecrow, and she got gassed and she fell off. And Jim Gordon finds out about this, and he just loses it. And he's like goes on a wild spree to hunt Batman and to take him out. And basically, what happens is it's all a dream. It was a Scarecrow episode. It was all a dream, and it was all about Barbara. And the great thing about that episode is that even though that episode was an illusion, even though it was fake, it's such a better episode than an episode like Perchance to Dream, because Perchance to Dream does that sort of like, oh, it's all a dream, it's all fake kind of thing, and this is Bruce Wayne's sort of idealized world, I guess. But it speaks so much to Barbara that her biggest fear, and why I love Barbara as a character, it speaks so much to her that her biggest fear is that she would die one day and that her dad would try and destroy everything and would try and kill Batman. And maybe that means that Barbara knows Jim well enough for that to be possible. But the end of that episode, again, kind of a tearjerker episode in my opinion, but at the end where, she wakes up from this nightmare and she returns home to her father and says to him, like, Dad, there's something I have to tell you. And she's going to tell him that she's Batgirl. And she goes to him and like says, like, there's something I have to tell you, and then he's basically like about to let her tell, and then he interrupts her and says, like, look, Barbara, I don't care. You're a grown up, whatever it is that you're doing, I just want you to know that I trust you and I love you and I support you no matter what you do. And that's a promise. And he winks to her, and then she says, Dad, and she hugs him. And it's like, that same Jim Gordon, I don't know if he would go on that kind of, that spree, that sort of anger induced, like, that sort of reaction, I don't know, and I feel weird about it. I feel weird about that performance, too. I know that was a good actor, I guess, that was playing Jim Gordon. I know he's been in Breaking Bad. I've never seen Breaking Bad. I don't really care. I didn't like that actor as Gordon. I thought he just sounded off. He sounded sleepy. He didn't... That's not really the Gordon that I want. Like, Gordon shouldn't sound this... He shouldn't sound like this sort of, this sort of gruff old guy. He should sound a little bit more like there's some more heart to him. I don't know. And that's something that even Gary Oldman had a little bit of, And it's just like it's not there quite with that performance. So again, another bummer about Arkham Knight. It's like I can't bring up this stuff without bringing up Arkham Knight, because I said I was going to talk about City, and it's all relevant to City. All this stuff is all, it all matters. But to go back to Arkham City, I mean. And just to talk about how much of a masterpiece that game is. I love the intro so much with Catwoman and with that music that plays, with that piano, and just like, it's so good. And I love the torture sequence in the beginning where, Batman says to Hugo, like, you can't win or whatever, you'll never get away with this. And then Hugo's like, I already have, like, to Hugo, he's already won. And it is true, he's right. He already did win. Protocol 10 was already set up, all he had to do was tip over the dominoes, and that was it. And, he's so arrogant that he throws Batman back into Arkham City, and he's just like, we'll be watching you, Like, he doesn't think that he's going to do anything. Like, he doesn't really care. He's here, to him, he's just another criminal that needs to be thrown into this final solution and to be taken out by these black helicopters that are going to show up and take everyone down. It's really a great intro, and I love when Penguin is like beating him with the iron knuckles, and then he breaks his wrist and he breaks out, and he just calls the suit in, and then suits up, and that music plays, and he goes over to deal with Catwoman and all that. And Catwoman she lets on that she knows more than she does, and Joker tries to snipe her, and you guys already kind of know, everything that goes through. I mean, I could recite that whole game really by memory, and it's just very, very, very good. And one of the things that I love, one of the details I love, is that you can actually, when Two-Face is hung upside down, you can go back and talk to him, actually. And I think that's really cool that you can do that. And then, oh man, you have that stupid achievement too in the basement. I don't know if you guys got this or remember this, but to change the clock on your PS3 or on your Xbox or whatever, so you can get the Calendar Man unlock or whatever. Oh my god, that was so stupid. Yeah, very poorly thought out, that whole thing. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's any fans out there, like hardcore Batman fans, that can tell me this, but I mean, I know a good amount about comics, but I actually don't know any good Calendar Man stories. So if there's any good Calendar Man stories that exist, let me know, because I don't know of any. So just maybe keep me posted about that if anyone knows any. And speaking of the Penguin, who I brought up earlier with the iron knuckles and everything, he's particularly nasty in this game. I'd say he's the nastiest portrayal and most evil portrayal that we've had of the Penguin since maybe the Danny DeVito Batman Returns. He's a real bad guy. Like the moment when you're infiltrating his museum and the Iceberg Lounge, and he's taking a cop's hand and freezing it with the freeze ray, and then like taking out a hammer and like blowing it up, and he says like, "Look, what do you know? His whole bloody hand explodes," or whatever, and like, he's just awful. Like he's laughing, like he just enjoys people's misery, for sure. And yeah, Penguin. I don't know. I really like the glass eye that he's got too, like the barrel that he's got, or the bottle that he's got like in his eye. It's a very cool take. And I like that in Arkham Origins he doesn't have the bottle, so that happens in between the two. And speaking of Arkham Origins, for any that are watching this, most of you are probably listening to this as a sort of podcast, but for any that are watching this, that mod, I'll provide a link to that mod. For anyone who wants it. That's the Tim Burton Batman skin for Arkham Origins. There are a few skins online. That one personally is my favorite. I think it looks the best. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of that costume. I think that the yellow circle with the bat inside of it, the bullseye symbol as they call it, is the best and most iconic Batman suit ever. Like, that's just Batman to me. It screams Batman more than like anything. So for anyone who wants to check that out, go ahead. And I love that Arkham Knight actually included that costume as a DLC, along with the Batmobile on top of that. I mean, come on, like, I couldn't ask for anything more than that, for sure. Yeah, so, on Arkham City, what happens after, dealing with Mr. Freeze and the Penguin and all that, you end up tracking, or you have to track the blood sample from one of Ra's al Ghul's agents, and it leads you down into the sewers. But before you go to the sewers, you end up meeting up with Robin again, and Batman is so arrogant with Robin, he's like immediately like shuts him down. Like, Robin's like, "You need my help," and Batman's like, "I know, like I don't need your help, like, go." Like, he's very, it's hard to see Batman be so stubborn even into his older age, because this is an older Batman. This is a Batman that's like in his 40s or something. This is a very weathered, driven, this is a Batman that's, gone through his career, and he's still kind of being shitty to people. That's one problem I have with Arkham City. I feel like there should have been a little bit more of that. But at the same time, I can understand where he's coming from, because this is also a Batman that is probably really tired of having to do his job. And the thought of fighting all of his villains again. It's like Arkham Asylum, like the opening pitch for Arkham Asylum, the video game, was like, let's make this the worst night of Batman's life. Let's make this game basically about just how shitty things can get for Batman in one day. And Arkham City just cranks that up to 11. And then Arkham Knight is like cartoony and how stupid it is with its like how you can't even fit all that in one night. Like how could you do that? That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, so like this is a Batman that is definitely worn down and very weathered and just tired of this crap. And I don't know, and then the whole thing with Talia as well. Like Talia is clearly his weakness. There's a reference to, remember that night that we spent in Metropolis? So he's with Talia at this point. Batman is definitely tired of all this. He would probably want to settle down. There might be a Damian Wayne hint there, that maybe that was going to be a thing. I know that was rumored that Warner Brothers Games Montreal was working on a Damian Wayne Batman game, and then that turned out to not be true, or that it was canceled or something. I really want a Superman game, by the way. Like I was saying, if Hitman is the ultimate Bond simulator and Arkham is like the ultimate Batman simulator and Uncharted is an Indiana Jones simulator, like I really, really want a Superman game. And unfortunately, the closest that we get to that is just the Injustice games or I guess the Lego Batmans, or you could play DC Universe Online and play as a Superman clone. I've done that before. Or you could play the Dragon Ball Z games, which are kind of like Superman. But that's all you get. Like, that sucks. Real bummer. So yeah, you're tracking Raish. You end up going underground to Wonder City, which, by the way, love Wonder City. Like absolutely, that's like the best. That's one of my favorite areas in the whole game and in the franchise. Like there's so much mystery. The music is so creepy. The guy's hung upside down. The creepy elevator man voice that's playing over the loudspeakers of like "Welcome to Wonder City" and giving kind of a background of this place and this sort of advanced technology. It's very sci-fi. It almost reminds me of BioShock. The idea that there would be like this underground city that had all this advanced technology. I really wish that they had incorporated that into the mainstream comic book continuity, but unfortunately they didn't do that. They had an opportunity to as well, because right around the time of Arkham City, that was 2011. That was right when Flashpoint happened. That was right when the New 52 relaunch happened, and Scott Snyder was taken over. Like he could have easily incorporated Wonder Tower and Wonder City into that. And by the way, when it comes to the earthquake stuff, the whole, No Man's Land reference and the fact that Arkham City is all just messed up and the ground is falling apart and all this stuff. Like, one of the things to bring up with that is it's not a natural earthquake as to why that happened. You kind of got to dig in the audio, or not audio. I think it's the background information that you can read that's in the game when you unlock Riddler trophies and stuff. Like that they have one of those for Wonder City, and when Ra's al Ghul was mining the Lazarus pits underneath the city, it was causing all kinds of malfunctions and sort of like gas leaks and explosions and sort of earthquakes that were going on. So all that stuff was going on because of Ra's al Ghul. Just some important backstory there that they kind of leave behind the scenes that I think is worth mentioning for anyone out there that missed that. I missed that. I didn't really realize that until, I don't know, my second or not second. It would have been like fourth or fifth playthrough or something that I saw that. I played this game a lot. So yeah, then after that you go through that trial and you have that cool boss fight. Which reminds me, boss fights, like, I really love the boss fights in Arkham City. I think Arkham Origins might have the best boss fights, just because of that Deathstroke one. It was really good. But, it is one of those things, like, it's part of the Arkham identity. I mean, whether you like the boss fights or not, I mean, these things are meant to be Metroidvanias, right? And one of the things that I associate with a Metroidvania is boss fights. You get into a boss fight, and you get a weapon upgrade, or a gadget. You get one of Batman's new gadgets, or in Castlevania, you get a health level up, or you get a new sub-item, sub-weapon or whatever. Things like that. That was the way it was with those kinds of games. Same with Metroid, you'll get the bomb that you can roll into a ball, or you get the boost or whatever. Like, those kinds of things are important to this genre. So it's very interesting. I think Arkham Knight isn't even... that's the game that officially wasn't Metroidvania anymore. I mean, Arkham Origins, you start to see that a little bit, where I think that the game design was a little bit dumbed down with Arkham Origins. It was a little bit copy-pasty from Arkham City. Like, they were just taking a lot of the ideas and copying them. It felt more like a copy-paste Metroidvania, I guess. But then you get to Arkham Knight, and it's not the same genre anymore. It's like, it's like Infamous, or like Spider-Man 2, or Spider-Man on PS4. It's an open-world sandbox superhero game. It's not... they basically abandoned those elements. But even... I don't know, like, even the Spider-Man PS4 game had more boss fights than Arkham Knight. So, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, that is just a weird thing to do. Strange direction to take it in. I gotta say, I really love this art here, by the way. This looks very Dave McKean, or Dave McLean, whatever his name is. Looks very, very much like Arkham Asylum, Serious House on Serious Earth. And, yeah, so I'm trying to think what happens after that. I mean, you take the potion, you come back, you fight Raish, and Batman is restored for the time being. He ends up going over to... where was it? I think you go back to the steel mill, and then, you deal with Joker, or you deal with Mr. Freeze, I think, stuff like that. Like I mentioned, you have that moment where Batman is on top of Mr. Freeze, and he's punching him in the face, right? And, like, the glass breaks, and you literally see the Joker, and it hallucinates, and, oh man, I hate to say it, but that's foreshadowing. That's foreshadowing for Arkham Knight. And again, I hate to trash Arkham Knight so much, but that does bug me, that, like, Batman, like, hallucinated and saw Joker in that scene, because then I can't help but think of Arkham Knight and how literally Joker's blood is, like, making him the Joker. That's so weird. Unless I'm misunderstanding that. And, yeah, but, not that all of Dini's ideas were great either. I mean, if I gotta point to something that might have been a bad idea from Dini, oh boy, that pregnancy test with Harley Quinn that tested positive... For any who don't know about that, there's a pregnancy test that you can find in Joker's warehouse in the steel mill. And they test positive, one of them. And in the Harley Quinn's Revenge DLC, they replaced it with a negative test. And that was when Paul Dini was out, because Paul Dini didn't work on that DLC. So, yeah, there might have been a creative disagreement on that with Harley being pregnant. And I don't know. I don't know how I feel about Harley Quinn being pregnant with Joker's baby. That's a little weird. I mean, I know that forgive me for being graphic here, but Joker's, he got chemical, he got bleached, right? Like, all of his chemicals. Like, did it only affect his skin? Like, I don't know, like, this is a horrible thing to think about, but I always just assumed it affected his balls, too, that it made him, like, infertile, that he couldn't, I assumed maybe he couldn't have kids. I don't know. What does a Joker baby look like? I mean, never mind. Forget I even asked. Forget I even brought this up. What the fuck? Yeah, anyways, you came back, or you go back to the steel mill. Obviously, the whole switcheroo happens. And then they play that awesome music where Streets of Fire, after the Catwoman sequence, when you're back as Batman again, and Protocol 10 is in full effect. And boy, it's really something. Like, and I love how the way the music ramps up. I recommend looking it up, Streets of Fire. I'll put it in the description or something. But yeah, Streets of Fire, and because I can't just play a clip of it. I got to play the whole thing, or you got to listen to the whole thing, you know. Um, and it's the way the music ramps up when the helicopters spot you, and the way it all kind of just goes crazy. I mean, it's really cool, and it's a great moment where like right when Protocol 10 happens, that's kind of when I like to return to the grave site where Bruce's parents died and listen to that Hugo Strange audio, because it's like that's when it like plays perfectly, right? Right when the moment when Hugo won and Batman is just like in turmoil, like, and he just kneels there and he's like, you know, how does it feel, Wayne? Like, I love that moment. And I'm really glad that they used Hugo Strange at all. Hugo Strange is a very underrated villain, underestimated. I think Arkham City really brought a lot of attention to this character. One thing that I think a lot of people don't know about is that Hugo Strange is actually Batman's oldest villain, one of his oldest. Hugo Strange actually predates the Joker. I don't know how many of you guys know that, but the Joker's first appearance was in Batman issue 1, and the Hugo Strange's first appearance was in Detective Comics 32, 33, something like that. I don't remember which, but it was in the 30s, I think. Detective Comics 30-something, maybe 36. Yeah, so, you know, Hugo Strange is a classic villain that kind of got, you know, thrown away after, you know, the Golden Age. People kind of forgot about Hugo Strange. But then he got brought back in the 70s, back when Neil Adams, Denny O'Neil, and Stephen Englehart were bringing the character back to a more to his roots and making him more serious and less campy like Adam West. That was when Hugo Strange had a resurgence. But then he kind of died off again and people forgot about him. And then Arkham City kind of brought attention back to him again, and I really like that. I really appreciate that about the game, and I thank Paul Dini for doing that and really acknowledging the wider universe of DC Comics and bringing in the kind of characters that, you know, you don't think about, or the ones that, you know, you don't, that people don't know about, you know. I even credit Christopher Nolan for doing that a little bit too. Like Victor Zsasz is in one of those movies. It's like a very brief appearance, but he's in there. Not a very well-known Batman villain. What's his name? I'm blanking right now. I was gonna think of someone. Who was it? Holy shit. There was someone in the Christopher Nolan movies. Oh yeah, Talia. I mean, most people don't know about Talia or Raish, you know. Christopher Nolan brought a lot of attention to those characters, and I really appreciate that. And even Bane. I mean, sure, comic book fans knew about Bane. And Bane, you know, there were popular toys and stuff, and Bane briefly showed up in Batman and Robin. But that wasn't real Bane. Like, that was a fake Bane, basically. So I give Christopher Nolan credit for that. And, you know, I don't like Tom King's Batman run, like I said. Just not my thing, you know. I don't like the way he writes Batman, personally. But, you know, I have to give credit that, you know, he does pull up some old villains. I don't particularly care for Kite Man, but he brought him in, and I think that's kind of cool that, like, you know, hey, like... And then some people like Kite Man now, and it's like, cool, you know, bring back old villains, make them cool, you know. I mean, that's basically what happened with Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze was a forgotten villain. No one really cared about Mr. Freeze until Mr. Dini brought him back and made him relevant again. And sometimes that's, you know, sometimes that's what it takes. And it's good, you know, it's good to have those kinds of things, and to make new characters like Harley as well, and like what Morrison did with Pig, Professor Pig. Though I have to be honest, I hate Professor Pig. Like, this is a personal pet peeve, but he's like my least favorite Batman villain. I just hate that guy. He's just so nasty. That whole mission in Arkham Knight, oh my god, that was my moment where it's like, you know, like the moment in The Dark Knight where Joker's like, you're gonna break your one rule. Like, I wanted Batman to break his rule and just snap Pig's neck. Like, oh my god, like, he's creating human zombies and, like, oinking all the time, and like, they're my experiments, my children, and, like making a bunch of pig noises. Oh, God. I hate that guy. Hate that guy. Kill it with fire. Kill it with fire, that's what I say. So, yeah, I wanted to bring up some of the villains here. One of the older villains one of the other villains that I wanted to bring up that's also kind of under the radar is Mad Hatter. And Mad Hatter has a cool appearance in Arkham City. I really like what they did with him. It's a very small thing, you know. You save Vicky Vale, then you see the Mad Hatter just like in the background. Like there's just one little shot of him. It's almost like a blink you miss it thing, where Mad Hatter shows up, and then you get the message on your intercom of like, good news, Master Bruce, that we found a cure for the Titan formula, for the Titan poisoning. And you go over there, and of course it was Mad Hatter who hacked your bat computer and literally poisoned you, and then you're hallucinating and you're under his control. It's a great sequence. And I really like the Mad Hatter sequence in Arkham Origins as well. It was very much a throwback to the Scarecrow sequences, where it was like a side-scroller again. Man, Arkham Origins is so underrated, man. Like, I love the side-scroller stuff in Arkham Asylum. I love how they brought it back in Origins for the Mad Hatter sequence. That game is so much better than Arkham Knight. I'm sorry. Like, Arkham Knight is cool, but it's just so... It's so missing something. It's just... something was seriously wrong with that game. Still a fun sandbox, still a fun playset. Like I said, like if you're making the analogy of comparing Batman, these Arkham games, to a playset, you really don't have a better playset than Arkham Knight because of how many skins they give you, because of how open the world is, because of all the Batmobiles that they give you. There's a lot there. But it's just... something's off, you know, like the storytelling and all that. And one other thing I don't like about Arkham Knight is I don't like the weapon wheel. I don't like the weapon wheel. You know, I get sick of weapon wheels in games. I don't know why every game's got to have a weapon wheel now. I feel like video games always copy each other nowadays, like back when Call of Duty was going on in its hype, you know, or in its prime, you know, getting hyped up, and all of a sudden we got Homefront, and we got all these weird clones, and like Battlefield's trying to be more like Call of Duty, and then with its like close quarters DLC and Battlefield 3, and then, you know, just these things happen and then they copy each other, and I don't like that trend of that trend of copying each other, because yeah, I mean, a weapon wheel in Arkham Knight, there was just no reason. I mean, you had gadgets already that you could, you know, get to on a snap. Like you could literally just click right or left on the D-pad, or if you had you're on keyboard and mouse, you had your hotkeys 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. Just press the button and you pull it up, and you're done. Like, why does it have to be you pause the game and then pull up the weapon wheel? That really threw me off. I got used to it eventually, but man, it throws me off. I don't like that about Arkham Knight. A lot of little details in the gameplay were just really off. Same with the Batmobile, obviously. And I mean, I said I didn't really mind the Batmobile, you know. Like, it's okay, I guess. I tolerate it. But, you know, the worst... I forgot to bring up the worst thing about the Batmobile, because the normal drone fights, well, they don't make any sense, and it doesn't make any sense that the Arkham Knight would have all these resources to do this and all that shit. But, like, like, I don't know. That stuff is okay, at least. But the worst part is when you're driving and you have to fight these giant tanks, and you literally have to get up behind them, charge up your blast, and blow them up, and you can't let them see you. Because if you let them see you, then they automatically go hostile and chase you. Like, and you can't hit them when they're chasing you. So they literally made stealth tank sequences with like searchlights that you have to avoid. Like, were they on crack? Like, what were they smoking when they decided that a stealth tank sequence sounds good? That doesn't even sound good on paper. Like there's some things that are like, oh, okay, this sounds good on paper, but this doesn't work in practicality or in reality. But that sounds bad on paper and doesn't work in reality. So I don't know what they were thinking with that. Yeah, and then the fact that you got to upgrade that Batmobile. Man, there's too many upgrades in Arkham Knight. They made Batman too powerful. He can like literally jump across the entire street. Like the streets were kind of small in Arkham City. You could jump across the street in that, but it was like they were smaller. Like you can jump off of like a highway, like or like an intersection with like four different lanes that are going, and then like jump across the entire intersection almost, and like judo kick a guy in the head, like across the entire thing. Like it doesn't make any sense. I think that they went too far with that, and I get it though because they're trying to expand. They want the game to be bigger, but they also want to make the combat more exciting. They got to keep one-upping themselves, and that's been a problem. And it's like at this point, I don't know, like they keep raising the bar. I mean, where else do you go at this point? Just make a Superman game. We got the Spider-Man game. That kind of upped it, you know. That kind of upped the ante and made it more like, hey, here's a system, a combat system where you can really move around, where you can like really like do a lot, where you got a lot of options and stuff like that, and a lot of agility. So, yeah. So is back on Arkham City, I guess. Protocol 10 happens. You go over to confront Hugo Strange. You have that great sequence in the elevator where they go and they shoot up the elevator and then you shoot out the top. It's actually kind of similar to the scene in Batman Forever, where in the intro where he's in the elevator and they shoot the elevator and then he comes out from another angle and like beats him up. So you do that, and then you can actually ignore them entirely. By the way, like if you when they shoot up the elevator on the way up to the Wonder Tower, you can like zip out the top and like jump off and like fly all the way around the tower and then zip line up and just avoid them completely, which I love to do. I love all the different play styles of this game, and the fact that you can be more stealthy, the fact that you can kind of avoid combat if you want, which is kind of how I like to play it. I like to play it more like that. You can tackle all the Riddler trophies at your own pace. You can go back and do stuff. You know, the game really lets you play how you want, you know. Now, the only downside to that is the whole Protocol 10 thing, and it's all done in one night, so it kind of gives you a false sense of, what do you call that? Like, you know, you gotta move. Like, ludonarrative dissonance, whatever. It's the false sense of urgency. That's the word I was looking for, urgency. You gotta move quickly. So that makes it a little bit annoying, but, you know, if you can kind of ignore that, then it's very nice to play the game at your own pace and kind of level up on your own or do whatever, you know. Play it like, you can play it kind of like Symphony of the Night, but Symphony of the Night kind of lets you tackle bosses in whatever order you want, and that's kind of different. Arkham is more straightforward. Like, you kind of have to do this and then that. I wish, you know, it would be really cool, actually. You know, there's a lot of potential with Arkham, with these kinds of games. It'd be really cool to have a system where you can actually, you know, do whatever you want, where you can, like, tackle anything in any order. That would be dope. If I could make an Arkham game, I'd make that, to be honest. And to have non-linear storytelling, I mean, that's great. Whenever you can have non-linear storytelling and have it, like, intersect back, and the game is aware of that, I mean, that takes a lot of programming and it takes a lot of writing, but you can actually make that work. There are games that do that. Like GTA 4 when you redo missions, or GTA 5 when you redo missions and it plays different dialogue and stuff like that. There's all kinds of cool things that you could do with that. So yeah, like, I don't know, like, I don't know where to take this franchise at this point, like, when I think about that. Like I said, that'd be really cool. I just played Zelda Ocarina of Time, actually, recently, and I played it in a very weird order. I was playing the Master Quest Edition, kind of a tangent here, but I was playing the Master Quest Edition, and basically what I did was I got to the Forest Temple, I beat that, and then I got Epona. I went and did the Ice Temple. I went and did which are supposed to do fire, water, spirit, and then shadow, or actually shadow and then spirit. But I skipped straight to the spirit temple by getting the long shot early, by going to the water temple early, and then in the Master Quest edition you can get the hook shot. You can get the long shot early. Like you can get it like right at the beginning of the dungeon in the Master Quest edition. They give you it early. While in the original edition you had to get further into the water temple to get it. So, you know, having a system like that, like I kind of wish Zelda games were a little bit more open like that. Traditional ones, not like Breath of the Wild, because Breath of the Wild is very different. That's almost like a different kind of game. But like a traditional Zelda game with a non-linear style, kind of like what, I haven't played A Link Between Worlds, but people said A Link Between Worlds kind of did that. I think that would be great for an Arkham game. So that would be really cool. So you fly up to Hugo Strange, and you're running out of time. The music, the urgency is ramping up. The lightning is striking, and then it plays that awesome operatic music, and then you go and clear out those tiger guards. Like that trailer, man, I love that cinematic trailer. I recommend that if anyone hasn't seen it. It's a great trailer with for Arkham City. And then you confront Hugo, and he just stands stoically in front of you and is like, you know, I am your greatest successor. I'm doing what you could never accomplish. And they just have a moment where they stare at each other, and Batman just kind of stares at him for a second, and then he just punches him in the face. And then he just grabs his head and just slams it against the glass and says, "Look what you've done." And then he says, "I know, it's beautiful, isn't it?" Like, he's just like, he's so convinced in himself. And, you know, I wish that they showed that in Arkham Knight. I wish that they showed that, for as horrible as it was that what Hugo Strange did, that it did actually clean up the city. That would have been kind of cool to see. But we don't really see that, unfortunately. Because instead what happens is Arkham Knight just spawns a million tanks instead. So yeah, and then, you know, the big reveal happens with Ra's al Ghul, and, you know, this is an interesting topic, because when I first played Arkham City, I think I was like 15 years old back when that came out. It's kind of stupid, I'm really young. So like, I was 15, and I played Arkham Asylum like 5 times, 6 times. I replayed that game like religiously. I loved Arkham Asylum. Like truly, I was just in love with that game. I replayed it on hard. I platinumed it. I got everything. I loved it. And even after platinuming it, I still replayed it. And then I played it on PC and all that. Which, by the way, those games are very difficult with keyboard and mouse, but that's neither here nor there. But Arkham City, when that came out, I remember being initially very disappointed by it. And the big reason why was because of the whole setup with Hugo Strange knowing Batman's identity and them never doing anything with it. And it's like, he knows who Batman is, but they don't do anything with it. And it's like, yeah, they kind of don't. Like, you get to the end, and it's like, what was the whole point of that? I guess the only point was that it was meant to foreshadow that Ra's was behind it all, because Ra's always knew who Batman was because of Talia. But they don't do anything with it. Like, Hugo doesn't reveal anything. The only thing that they do with it is actually in the DLC. So, if you play the challenge maps, I don't know how many of you guys know this, but I think the challenge maps are meant to be canon. And the challenge maps for Nightwing are in Wayne Manor, with the Tiger Guards. And apparently that happened, so, in canon. So when, unless I'm wrong about this, someone correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about this, that, while you're going up that elevator, up to Wonder Tower, right in that moment, Hugo Strange is literally, like when he says, like, what happens when I call in your butler and drag him through the streets, or whatever, that, like, he's literally, at that moment, he's calling up Tiger Guards, and he's having them come to the Wayne Manor to take out Alfred, and to take him as a hostage. But literally Nightwing shows up and saves him, and that is such a, just, like, clap moment of, like, hell yeah, like, go Dick, you know, he saves him. I wish that was, like, part of the story. I wish that was, like, not just a challenge map. I wish that they just, like, panned it over to Nightwing and like you literally save Alfred. That would be so awesome. But instead we get the challenge map instead, which is, good enough. I like that challenge map. They put a lot of detail and a lot of work into the Batcave and into Wayne Manor, making it all fleshed out and everything. And they put a lot of work into this game. I mean, attention to detail. Honestly, like, there are few games that put as much attention to detail as Arkham. Like, short of just, like, BioShock and some of those games, like, there's so much attention to detail in Arkham Asylum and City. I mean, these environments are incredible. And I love how lore accurate they are. You look at No Man's Land, you look at the map when you read No Man's Land, and it's all the same, man. Like, it's Amusement Mile, it's Park Row, it's the industrial sector. Wonder Tower isn't there, that was added later, but they have all that stuff, and that's all authentically Batman. The financial district in Arkham Origins, that's there, that exists. And yeah, and I know speaking of No Man's Land, one thing I forgot to bring up in relation to the whole thing that I mentioned earlier with Jim Gordon and Batman kind of having that moment where he's like, it was an honor, Jim. Like, that moment, one thing I just wanted to give a detail on to further texture that is there is actually a moment in No Man's Land where Batman and Jim actually are fighting each other, because basically after the big earthquake, Batman had to go off the radar for a while. And it's kind of hard to explain why, but he had to go underground for a while, away from the earthquake, because of how things were going. And he needed to kind of interact with Gotham kind of from a distance. And Gordon felt like he was abandoned by Batman. He felt betrayed. And he basically becomes like very anti-Batman. He hates Batman. And that's why he ends up doing that deal with Two-Face and ends up basically making a huge mistake. And then Two-Face betrays him, and he holds him hostage in this courtroom with Montoya there, and Harvey Bullock shows up, and Batman's got to save him in this courtroom hostage situation, and he holds his wife Sarah hostage, Jim's wife, and Sarah actually dies at the end of No Man's Land, sort of spoiler. Man, I'm sorry if that spoiled anyone. I know it's a comic book from like 1999 though, so it's kind of old. But yeah. So basically, what happens is after that, there's a moment where Batman meets up with Jim again, and he's like, Jim, I know that you feel like you were betrayed by me, and I need to prove to you that I am loyal, that I'll always be loyal. And Batman uncowls himself and reveals that he's Bruce Wayne. But Jim looks away and says, put that cowl back up, damn it. You think that I would disrespect you enough to let you give me your secret identity? I respect you way more than you think I do. And then Batman put it back up. Like, so be it. Like, Jim respects Batman so much that even when Batman offers to reveal his secret identity, he still is like, no. I know you, and I respect you enough. I know why you have to do what you have to do. And for all you know, I already know who you are. So don't worry about it. We're partners again. And they shake hands. And, that's a great moment. And that says a lot about Jim and the kind of man he is, And I do like that at the end of Arkham Knight, that does come full circle. But back to Arkham City, yeah, so you deal with Hugo Strange, and, I remember finding it disappointing at the time that, they didn't really do anything with it, but then kind of later on they make up for it with the Nightwing challenge mission. And then Hugo Strange sacrifices his life and explodes Wonder Tower in an attempt to kill Ra's, because Ra's betrays him, because he was just another loose end for Ra's to take out, Means to an end. Ra's is basically the ultimate puppet master who's just playing everyone for his own gain. And he's very like Illuminati. He's very New World Order kind of, conspiracy type character. That's why I'm really excited to see if they do Court of Owls, which apparently that's the rumor that they're going to do that with the next Batman game. So I'm very excited about that. And yeah, and then basically Batman jumps out with Ra's, and then Ra's gets impaled, and then he's got to take another trip to a Lazarus pit, and then the hostage situation becomes very real when Joker still is like, hand over my cure, and I've got Talia. And then that epic music plays again, and you go to Monarch Theater. You go where it all began, you know? It ends where it began, where Batman's parents were shot. Where this whole thing, his entire career has been building up to this moment. His entire life goal of battling death and not killing and being a pacifist, that this all comes to a head in this ultimate moment of failure where he stands on the burned roads of Gotham that are completely shaken to its core in awful like earthquakes and everything, and you know, the woman he loves is being held hostage, and it's playing this like epic string music. I think it's I don't remember the name of the song, but it's like it's the music that plays when, if you have the game on PS3 and you load it up, and it like plays like on the dashboard or on the XMB. It's like that same song. And yeah, what a moment. And then you go into the Monarch Theater, and the big twist happens with Clayface. And I personally really like that reveal. I felt like it was cheap at the time, but because it's like, you know, oh, it's Clayface. Like, who cares? It's Clayface. Like, it's always Clayface. If it's not like Clayface, you can use him for anything. You can use him for any twist. It is a little bit cheap, but I like how they pulled that off, because like in previous or in playthroughs after that, you know, I would replay it, and there is a lot of subtle hints that was Clayface. If you turn on detective vision, actually, when you're fighting the Joker at the steel mill, and it's the cured version of him, the fake cured version of him, you can see through him. You don't see a skeleton, which is kind of a nice detail there. And there's a lot of little details that they have. You know, one thing, you know, when I was seeing the really great graphics in Arkham Asylum for the first time, I remember in Detective Vision seeing Batman punch people, and I was thinking, like, man, wouldn't it be so cool if you could see literally the bones breaking in Detective Vision while you're punching them, and like snapping their legs and wrists and stuff? Like, wouldn't that be badass? And yeah, that would be really awesome. It's a shame that even with the next-gen consoles, they didn't do that, but that would be dope. That needs to be a feature in whatever next Arkham game, whenever they announce that. I really hope Rocksteady's working on a Justice League game, or apparently they aren't doing a Superman game, which is a shame, but they might be doing an ensemble Justice League type game. And you know, this all brings up some things to talk about with the free flow combat system. Because I'm curious what you guys think about the free flow combat system, if anyone wants to comment on that. Because that system, I don't know where that system really, I mean, I know it came from like a rhythm game type thing, but I don't know why it caught on the way it did. When I listened to Colin Moriarty's topic of the Batman Arkham stuff on Knockback, he said that, like, I don't know when this became a thing, you know, because it did become a thing, and it's like, it's really not the deepest combat system ever. This might be blasphemous to say, but there's some things I like better about Assassin's Creed as a combat system. I love Assassin's Creed. I'm like a huge fan of that. I mean, Arkham might, there's more depth, I guess, but there are pros and cons to that combat system, I think, and it gets a little bit old. It gets tiresome. I don't really get tired of Assassin's Creed's combat, but it's a lot more basic and there's a lot less depth to it, but it's a lot more like kind of easy gratification. Arkham's is less easy gratification and a little bit more skill-based, but it's a little bit more tiresome. I get tired of the different enemy types. Like, here's the shield guy. In Arkham Knight, here's the guy that charges you. That totally sucks. I hate that enemy. But you can knock him out with one batarang, which is kind of cool. Yeah, and then, you know, you have the Silent Predator stuff, which kind of just balances it out. Because that stuff, I feel like that stuff could have more depth, and I'm really bummed out that there's a lot of, I love stealth. There's a lot of potential with stealth with a Batman game, for sure. And, I'm a huge fan of the stealth genre. I love Metal Gear Solid. I love Hitman. I love Elder Scrolls and Fallout games where I play as a sneaky guy. So, there's a lot of potential with the stealth in Arkham games, but I feel like that stealth has been missed, unfortunately. And I feel like in Arkham Knight, they kind of just gave up. They were kind of just like, you can multi-fear takedown. And Batman basically wears battle armor and he's like immune to like 1,000 shots. Like, they kind of just gave up on it. And sure, it's harder on the harder difficulty, but it's not that hard. I mean, it's... I don't know. Arkham Knight just went in such a bad direction. Like, no boss fights, dumbed down stealth. Even the maps are dumbed down, I think, a little bit. And that's just kind of a bummer to me. I don't like what they did with that. It's something that they need to address in the future. They need to bring back more depth in their stealth challenge maps and in their maps. Even the challenge maps in Arkham Knight were disappointing. They didn't even have challenge maps in the beginning. They added them with DLC, which, good, but even some of the challenge maps are a little bit disappointing, where I'm like, these aren't as good as they were, because you added too many tools. I can multi-fear takedown people. Like, what's the point, And Arkham Origins, as much as I like Arkham Origins, that started that negative trend, because they give you that tool that that Deadshot has, the grapple where you can shoot their leg and grapple them up to a gargoyle, which it just gives you free, easy takedowns, and it just kind of dumbs down the game, unfortunately. So yeah, you have that final confrontation with Joker, and it's one of the best confrontations with Joker that I've seen. I really love Mask of the Phantasm, where you have the Joker really like going all the way, like turning it up to 11, and Mark Hamill just giving his best laugh. It's almost like more of an antithesis to that, because Joker is it's a weak, coughing, tired laugh. Versus, what we saw in Mask of the Phantasm, which is like peak Joker laugh. And it's an interesting take on the Joker there. And it's interesting to see Clayface get knocked into the Lazarus Pit, and then that's never addressed, like what that even means. What does it mean if Clayface ends up in the Lazarus Pit? I don't know. I hate to say it, but maybe Paul Dini kind of wrote himself into a corner because he just created too many plot lines. But, so maybe Arkham Knight never would have... maybe it never would have been, maybe it never would have met expectations. I don't know. But I feel like if Paul was doing it, I would have trusted him a little more than the people that they got. And yeah, that's basically the game. You get to the end there. Batman says, "I would have saved you." Joker says, "That is actually pretty funny." Kind of a callback to Killing Joke. Only this time, Batman's making the joke instead of Joker. And then Joker dies. And then he carries him out. And, they can't let go of the Joker. And this is a problem in comics and in Batman in general. I feel like Joker gets a little bit overused, where it's like you need Joker. But it's like, you don't need him, though. You don't really need Joker, but it's like every story has to be a Joker story. Like Arkham Origins, the Black Mask twist. I actually kind of liked it, personally, but whatever. I know K-Wing on his channel, I know he hated that twist. I think he said it was actually a ripoff of another comic book, but if it was a ripoff of another comic book, it's not a ripoff of a comic book I've read, and I've read a lot of Batman, so it didn't bother me. Arkham Asylum, obviously a Joker story in many ways, but also an ensemble. And Arkham City, Joker's in it for sure, but it all hinges on him at the end. But it's also very much a Hugo Strange and Ra's al Ghul story. So I really love this concept art. Sorry, but I love this concept art here. This is amazing. If only a game could, capture the concept art completely. I feel like Arkham Knight came pretty close, actually, to capturing that level of, looking as good as this. That's beautiful art. That's Wonder City, I think, underground. Man, what a thing. Anyways, next after this, I mean, you have Harley Quinn's Revenge, which, you know, I got nothing really to say about. It's cool, you know. I like Robin. Robin's awesome. Tim Drake is my favorite Robin, personally. Um, I love Tim Drake. I love Stephanie Brown as Batgirl. Credit to anyone who knows who she is. If you don't know, you should maybe give her a Google search or give her a YouTube. She's a really cool take on Batgirl that lasted for only 2 years, unfortunately. Man, this concept art's great too. But yeah, so yeah, that was basically it. Now, how do I round this out? I mean, Batman was defeated. I mean, you look at, like, if I could summarize where Batman's at this point, especially based on Harley Quinn's Revenge, it's basically depression. Batman is, like, done. He's defeated. His voice is so weak. I've never heard a more weak performance. And not weak as in bad, but weak as in, like, weakness, as in, like, vulnerable. I've never heard a more vulnerable performance as Batman from Kevin Conroy specifically. It was a very personal, like, he just felt very tired, obviously, and yeah, and that's, yeah, I feel bad for him with everything that he's been through, and it's a sad place to end it. It's like, I hate the ending of Arkham Knight because it doesn't really make any sense, but I kind of prefer the more melancholy ending of Arkham City as it stands. I kind of just, you know, assume after that Batman probably retired eventually, and then you get the whole Batman Beyond sort of timeline. That's kind of how I view it, but yeah, but I mean, man, there's some great stuff in Arkham Knight though that I still kind of consider canon in my mind personally, of, like, you know, personal canon, like the way they handled Mr. Freeze, man. Like, for anyone out there who hasn't played it, you got to do it. You got to play that DLC, because I mean, there's a moment where, and I'll just spoil it here. Obviously, there's timestamps in the description for anyone to skip ahead, but there's this part where Mr. Freeze finally finds Nora and has finally had an opportunity to free her, to save her, and basically she's gonna die, and, like, she's gonna die anyways. Like, he saved her, but he can only bring her back for a short period of time. Like, he's got a week with her, and he's just like, this is it. Like, I'm just gonna spend my last week with you, and that's it. And then Batman's basically convinces Freeze that, like, you gotta let her go, man. You gotta let her go. And Batman lets him go, and they have their last week together, and that's it. And again, like I said, the DLC better written than the game. I mean, my God. I mean, I didn't tear up, but I felt it, man. I felt it in my chest, you know. That was a rough moment, very rough. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to cover on this stuff. You know, I really love these games, and I hope that this video inspires you guys out there that are listening to either replay the Batman games, or maybe get some comic books, maybe read them, maybe watch those movies again. You know, or I hope that you learned something. You know, I know I can kind of memorize a lot of these names, like Denny O'Neil and some of these guys, and, you know, the Chuck Dixon and the history of Batman comics going back from, like, 1970 over to probably, like, modern day, actually. I know that world pretty well from 1970 to now, and I can't say I know much about the Dick Sprang era, you know, the old school, like, you know, Adam West era. I don't know too much about that. I know a little bit, but But, it's been a real pleasure to go back and to talk about these things and to talk about superheroes in general. And, I want to talk more about this stuff. I want to talk more about comics. I'd love to review comics. But, yeah, thank you so much for watching. One thing that I kind of wanted to leave this on is actually a topic about Superman. And I wanted to talk about the importance of this character because I was more of a Batman fan. I wasn't a Superman fan growing up. And you guys it'll all make sense why I'm talking about Superman when we come to the end of this, because I wanted to leave this on sort of a positive note and on a story, of, how much superheroes and how much these characters really matter, and how eternal they are. I was not a Superman fan until about 2 years ago. I watched the movie Man of Steel, which really kind of changed my expectations as to what Superman is, because I thought Superman was always so cheesy, just kind of like, he's your stock standard superhero. He flies, he saves Lois, kryptonite, kryptonite, and that's it, Superman, the end of story. Like, that's what I thought Superman was. I didn't really know he was so science fiction based. I didn't know that you had General Zod and spaceships and all this stuff. I didn't know he was really a sci-fi superhero, kind of like Green Lantern or something like that. I didn't really think of him like that. But it all makes sense, of course. Like, I watched Justice League growing up, and the Watchtower, orbiting, like a space station orbiting Earth. It is very science fiction. And it is very heightened reality science fiction. But when I realized that Superman was that was when I just decided, like, I'm going to watch Superman the Animated Series. And I remember it happened 2 years ago. It was 2018. And that was the same year I released my GTA 4 video. And that was right around the time I started getting into Superman. And it's been kind of a journey since then, personally. Because I just feel like I've learned more and more about this character and who he is, and how important these kinds of characters are. Because, like I said, Superman and Batman, they really are night and day difference, and they kind of complement each other in a way because of who they are. A night and day difference, literally. No pun intended there, really, but literally. And I've realized that for myself personally, I feel like I can relate to both of these characters a lot. People will say they don't really relate to Batman, or they don't really relate to Superman because, Batman is hard to relate to because I wasn't raised by a butler in a super house or something. And I wasn't raised like that, but I know what it's like to experience tragedy from a young age. I know what it's like to grow up in a get to be moving from place to place, and to kind of grow up in a house that's like big, and sometimes you kind of feel alone. I kind of get that. Meanwhile, Superman kind of represents something like a sort of desire of, like, the whole family, the nuclear family, the wholesome nuclear family, that is sort of a God-fearing family that just, they love their kid and they'll do anything for them, and there's something beautiful about that, and the sort of optimism that Superman shows is something that I personally really find inspiring and really relate to. I mean, I'm not always an optimist. I can be a pessimist a lot of the times. We've talked about this topic before, with GTA 4, with being positive or being negative, and obviously, you need both. You look at religions like the Bible and Christianity, like, and the Abrahamic religions, like they're not necessarily 100% positive, like there's heaven and there's hell, it's not 100% optimistic. So, you always need both, but I have this desire to be a positive person, and Superman and Batman, they sort of represent these sort of opposites. Like, I remember there was a video of Grant Morrison talking about Superman and saying that, he had this weird moment where he saw a guy, and who knows if this story is even true, but he saw this guy at Comic-Con who was dressed up like Superman, and he was writing All-Star Superman comic book at that time, and he went out and talked to this guy and said to him, so what do you think of Batman? Like, he just started asking him these normal questions, and apparently he responded with something along the lines of, I really love Batman, I care about him, but, I'll be honest, sometimes I feel like he doesn't see the good in people like I do, or he doesn't try to see the good in people like I do. And that is true, Batman, he does have a soft heart in there somewhere, but he does look more negatively at situations. He wants to look at a situation or he doesn't want to, but he has to look at a situation realistically. Superman can be really, that's one of the things that makes Joker kind of a tough villain for Superman to deal with, because he's so chaotically evil. He's used to dealing with lawful evil, like Lex Luthor and some of these characters, and General Zod, who's like an authoritarian, lawful dictator, or even Darkseid. All of Superman's villains they tend to be more lawful evil. Batman has to deal with a lot more of the chaos, and Superman sees that, and sometimes he doesn't know how to react to that. And it's interesting when you see Superman react to Batman's villains, when you see him get mind controlled by Poison Ivy in Batman Hush, or when you see some of these his interactions with some of these characters. Obviously, Superman's he's weak to magic, so how does he react to someone like Ra's al Ghul, who can actually kill him? So, and of course, Ra's al Ghul is a mass manipulator, as we see in stories like Tower of Babel, and stories like this, like Arkham City. Ra's al Ghul is he's like a mix. It's like if you took, this is a bad example, but it's like if you Ra's al Ghul is like if you took Batman and you mixed him with Lex Luthor, and you mixed him with Enchantress or something. Like, he's got magic, he's got money, he's got power and manipulation, and he's like a freaking ninja too. So he's like everything. And he's a mass manipulator, mass planner. So how do you deal with someone like that from Superman's perspective? So there's so much potential there with what you can do with this character. And, one of the things that I love about Superman as well is that he doesn't wear a mask. And that says so much about these two characters. It's become a cliche that superheroes wear masks. They always have to wear masks, right? It's part of their identity. But Batman wears a mask because he doesn't trust anyone. Because he has to keep his secret a secret. Even Jim, he can't really trust him. He does eventually, like in No Man's Land, like in that example I gave. But Batman can't really trust much of anyone. But Superman, sure, he has his secret identity with the glasses, but it's pretty flimsy. Anyone could figure that out. And he basically does that just so he can give himself some free time, as Jor-El told him in the movie, look, you can't spread yourself too thin. The more you give to the people, the more you're going to be possibly corrupted. You need to live life as a human. You need to live as one of them. And that's all important, but Superman, he's the kind of person that would look you in the eye, and, say, stay safe. It's still technically the safest form of travel, or like flying, or, even something small like saving a kitten from a tree. That's not something that Batman typically does. But Superman will, because he wants to help the little guy. He wants to help everyone on a smaller basis. And that's why it's always tricky for me when I deal with certain certain comic books that don't write Superman in the way that I like, where they write him too much in his Golden Age roots, where he's just very, very, like, authority, very, like, almost authoritarian in himself, where he just kind of does things his own way. He doesn't really deal with anything in a sort of, like, Superman's a libertarian, basically. He should be letting people live and knowing that his power is so powerful that he shouldn't interfere in politics. He can't interfere. That's why Lex Luthor became president in the comics. Because of the No Man's Land incident, he came in to No Man's Land, and back when it was lawless, like, No Man's Land was a lawless area, so that let him come in with his sort of his sort of neoliberal sort of, or lawless sort of, like, he could use his money to basically get in there and fix it, like, through PMCs, and get in there and create camps that can, do relief efforts. And when he made the government look bad, that's how Lex got his way into power, and then he bribes politicians, and that's how he got in and basically said, like, we shouldn't be having these laws. We should be breaking them. Like, that's how you get things done. And Superman argued against that in his own way, but he couldn't interfere because he's Superman, and that would be wrong. He's got all the power in the world. But then you look at, like, the Golden Age, and he's, like, flying politicians around by their balls, basically, and just saying, like, hey, I'm Superman, nothing you can do about it. Hey, why don't you take care of the poor, by the way? Oh, and hey, rich people, why don't you give that to that guy? Like, Superman was just kind of a dick back then. He was a good dick, but he was a dick. And sometimes modern comics try and do that again, and I disagree with that. Like, I remember Superman Birthright kind of tried to do that. Like, Superman does, like, a mock execution. There's, like, some guy who's, like, a far right-wing guy. He's got, like, a Confederate flag, and he's selling illegal arms, and Superman walks in and, like, takes a gun, points it at his head, fires the gun, and then catches the bullet in midair, and does, like, a mock execution. And I'm like, you can't do that with Superman. You don't understand the character. That's something Zod would do. That's not something Superman would do. Truth, justice, and the American way, that means more than just truth, justice, and patriotism. That means truth, justice, and the American way. In other words, freedom. It's about protecting American values, not protecting American government. And your perfect ideal America. Like, it's about protecting freedom. It should be it's not just the American way, it's the human way. And that kind of optimism and that positive spirit, I think, is something that it's just something that needs to be put out in the world right now. And right now, comics are going digital only for now because of the coronavirus. And, that's fine. You can do digital only. That's a good way to get it out there. But, I really wish that it was physical right now because I do prefer to read physical. But, to anyone out there that, maybe wrote off Superman, or maybe didn't like him or had problems with him, I understand. I had problems with him for a while. But just know that the modern take on Superman is different from the older take, and look at him as kind of an inspiring example. I think that's the best way to look at him, because really, he's an important character, and I think it was important to me to say that, to say that now of all times, when people are down and not, life isn't looking too positive right now, that, a character like Superman could make a world of difference. And a character like Batman too. Nothing wrong with Batman either. And Batman represents positivity in his own way, in his way of sort of representing a sort of self-sacrificing, almost Christ-like figure of, like, he goes out every night and gets punished for you, to save you, to help you. There's a whole great Grant Morrison explanation of that sort of in when he does the Kevin Smith podcast. I'll actually link one of those in the description here. But to round it out, I kind of want to end on a story of how important Superman is to me. A friend of mine was depressed at one point and was suicidal. And I remember the moment that I talked to him, that the emotional reaction that it got out of me, and the sort of, like in my mind I was thinking almost, it's like, what would Jesus do, right? Or what would Superman do? Is what I was thinking. And it's like, Superman just spoke through me when I was talking to him. And it's like, I quoted All-Star Superman. There's a moment in All-Star Superman where Superman is standing on the edge of a building with this girl, and this girl is about to kill herself because of something to do with a doctor and something to do with cancer or whatever, or some kind of chronic disease. And he shows up and tells her, like, the doctor was held up, and it's not as bad as you think it is. It's never as bad as you think it is. And he hugs her. And that's so important. That's important in my personal life. That's important. That should be important to everything, to everyone. For how far humans have become. We may seem weak, we may seem sheltered, we may seem pandered at times, but the human spirit can't be crushed, and you're so much smarter than you think you are. You're so much stronger than you think you are. It's never as bad as you think it is. And that human spirit can't be underestimated, and that's the power right there, in my opinion, of superheroes and characters in general that are inspiring, not just superheroes, but for whatever reason, there's something about superheroes, there's something about men dressed up in long underwear, wearing capes, specifically, that is, for whatever reason, inspiring. There's something childish about it. There's something basic about it that appeals to the inner child in you, and it's something that you can find hope in. I find hope in that S symbol. I find hope in that bat symbol. Even the Wonder Woman stuff. I mean, Wonder Woman, I feel bad because I feel like I've left her out now, but Wonder Woman's cool too. I kind of forget about her. To me, I kind of view her as like, she's kind of like the general of the Justice League. I kind of forget about her as a standalone superhero. I kind of view her more as like an arm of the Justice League, and how, without Wonder Woman, there would be no Justice League. And how, important that is. I feel like she should almost be the leader of the Justice League. Superman, sure, he's got the positivity and the will, the ability to speak and inspire others, and when he died, in Death of Superman, how he inspires people, that's all important. And then Batman's the sort of tactician, but Wonder Woman actually comes from a military background of being an Amazonian. She's like the true person that should be leading the Justice League in many ways, though she can also take things too far. Look no further than Kingdom Come, the comic book Kingdom Come, and you get that exact example there. So, yeah, I mean, I talked about how inspiring Superman is to me, and, Batman is very, very inspiring too. Is he as inspiring as Superman to me? Probably not, technically. I'm still more attached to Batman, or as attached, because, like I said, guys, I grew up with Batman, more than Superman. I didn't really become a Superman fan until later. But, when I think about the things that make Batman inspiring, in his own way, like I said, he's very Christ-like in that he goes out every night and gets his ass kicked to keep Gotham safe, to keep people safe. But I think the other thing that's most inspiring about Batman and the triumph of his human spirit, the fact that, he never, ever gives up, ever. Like, why do we fall? You guys already know. You know how to finish that line. Why do we fall so we can pick ourselves back up? Why does Batman get his back broken so it can get repaired? Why does Batman, have Jason Todd? Or why does Jason Todd get, totally destroyed by a crowbar? So he comes back and Batman still never gives up. He still tells Jason that, like, he's not giving up on him, that he wants him back. He welcomes him home. Like, I will take you home. Please come home with me. He'll do anything for his children. And Jason said no, like, my way is the better way. And like I said about the True Detective writer that kind of talked about Batman and, like, Batman's motivation. Why does Batman not kill? And it's because his enemy is death. And he said not because of some petty bullshit of, like, or some stupid excuse of, like, it would be too easy or whatever. And when he said that, of course, he's referring to Under the Red Hood. But I would suggest to that writer who worked on True Detective, I would say to him that you can have both of these things, in fact, that Batman's enemy is death, and that he will go that extra mile. He will do anything to stop someone from dying. Even the Joker, as we see at the end of Arkham City. I still would have saved you, as he says. Like, even then. But it's not just that. It's not just that his enemy is death. It's also that he will go that extra mile. And, yeah, guess what? It would be too easy to just kill them. And that's perfectly in character. That line is perfectly in character. And that's why I love that Red Hood movie, and I can't wait to rewatch that. And I recommend anyone out there to watch that if you haven't. There's also a comic book that it was based on, but I recommend the cartoon for sure. So yeah, it's like, this is a character that never gives up. Does Barbara give up when she gets shot in the spine? No, she becomes Oracle. She never gives up. Does Tim Drake give up when, bad things happen with him, with his parents, and, with Stephanie Brown and all that? Like, no. Like, these people, that is, like, their defining trait, is that they never, ever give in. And that's what Batman teaches them, that human spirit, that you always trust in yourself, no matter what the odds are. No matter what you may think, that as long as you believe in yourself, as long as you push, you can do anything. You can be anything. You can be a superhero if you just push hard enough. If you just tell yourself, I can, And that's something that I've struggled with in my life, to be honest, because I'm someone who's a little bit lacking in ambition, to be honest. I feel like I don't do enough in life. We're always our own worst critics, of course, but, yeah, so, at the end of the day, I think that's what I want to leave you guys with, that these characters matter. That's why I named this video that these characters matter, and I'm sorry that I kind of derailed this. I know that this video was very scattershot. I know I talked about a lot of different topics, but, to just talk about Arkham is not enough. I needed to talk about everything, because this character is larger than life. These characters are larger than life, and all of it needs to be discussed. And, Batman, anyone, like what they say in Arkham, in Dark Knight Rises, and some people kind of say, oh, it's cheesy, like, the whole anyone can be Batman thing. The only person that, you can be Batman by just, putting, what was the line that I think Joseph Gordon-Levitt says, his character in Robin in the movie. He says, all it takes is someone who would put a jacket around a kid's arms that, is cold and hungry in the night, and whatever the analogy uses, like, that person's Batman, Like, anyone who goes that extra step, anyone who never gives up, anyone who keeps fighting, that's Batman, And in a time like this, we need people, like that. And, yeah. So, I leave you with, that, be the Batman. I mean that literally, not just in the video game sense, I guess. But I guess it's also kind of hard because, you can't leave the house right now, so I guess we can't be Batman. But, I think communicating and making each other feel a little less alone is, that might just be enough. So, yeah, and that's what I leave you guys with on this. So, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
You taught me everything I know about crime fighting, Bruce, but the most important lesson was to never give up.